Chapter 478. Red and Blue Battle Energy. Continuous attacks. The onlookers were stunned. This was clearly a sword fight between two Sky Knight, not an Earth Knight and a Sky Knight. Am I seeing things? Viscount List's sword fighting strength is so terrifying. Can an Earth Knight achieve such a fierce attack? Such a surging fire battle energy. Incredible. Powerful. Everyone exclaimed at this moment. They were all experienced knight and had experienced countless battles on the battlefield. They knew the gap between the sky and the earth. It was absolutely an insurmountable moat. However, List had created a bridge and turned the moat into a passageway. He was unexpectedly able to stand on equal footing. Unfortunately, just as the exclamation fell, the scene changed instantly. After maintaining the balance for less than 10 seconds, List's battle energy couldn't support it anymore and was drowned by the blue and white water vapor. Clang. Gold and iron collided. He couldn't help but let go of his long sword. He took 6 steps back and almost fell from the guardrail into the sea. He grabbed the guardrail and stabilized his body. Phew. He exhaled and wiped the sweat on his forehead. He deeply understood the gap between him and the Sword Saint. As long as William was serious, he couldn't even withstand one move. But it was impossible for the Sword Saint to kill him in one move. He could still withstand 2 or 3 moves before being killed. If it was an ordinary Sky Knight, he could probably resist for 10 or 20 rounds. If I don't become a Sky Knight, I can't fly and dodge, so it's hard to compete with a Sky Knight. Intermediate Fire Dragon Battle Energy. No matter how famous it is, it's only an intermediate battle energy. He was a little disappointed with his current strength. Dragon Battle Energy had a limited effect on his strength. However, he didn't know that his performance had shocked the onlookers. Even William, who was taking back his long sword, looked at him with a very complicated expression. As a veteran Sky Knight of nearly 20 years, he naturally knew how strong he was. However, today an Earth Knight gave him the feeling that he was on an equal footing. Furthermore, it was his 17-year-old son. Even if it was only for a short moment, it was enough to leave him in shock and disbelief. He turned around and looked at the onlookers. All right, disperse and go back. Don't crowd on the deck. Let the shipwrights repair the damaged deck. The battle wasn't thrilling, but it still caused a lot of damage to the deck. Even the deck made of stone could not withstand the shockwaves from the battle between the two. Everyone was dismissed. William Lee then said to the disappointed List, "Follow me to the cabin." Inside the cabin, a retainer knight brought 2 cups of coffee. William took a sip, then stared at List and said, "You're right. Your strength cannot be underestimated. If it was 20 years ago when I had just become a Sky Knight, I might have been defeated by you if I was careless. I thought I was already very strong. I didn't expect there to be such a big gap between me and a Sky Knight." List shook his head. What he meant was that he was not satisfied with the dragon's fighting energy. However, to William it sounded different. "You shouldn't think that way. You are in the process of becoming a Sky Knight, but you haven't succeeded yet. You are still an elite Earth Knight. The fact that you can unleash such powerful combat power is already something to be proud of." "I understand," List replied. "But I thought I would be more talented." The Earl was stunned. He felt as if he had sprained his back. "How much more talented could you be? You became a Sky Knight at the age of 16 and became a Dragon Knight candidate of the mainland kingdom? Your current performance is in no way inferior to those Dragon Knight candidates. It took you less than 2 years to become a Sky Knight from an Earth Knight." He had an indignant look on his face. "Do you know that in the 40 years of my life, I've never heard of such behavior from you?" List wanted to say something. The Earl did not give him a chance to interrupt. "I have never heard of even a 17-year-old Sky Knight in the history of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. In fact, there are still geniuses. Marquis Bull's grandson is a genius." Marquis Bull's grandson, Andre Sapphire, was able to forge a mithril armor at the age of 12. It is clear that his fighting energy training is already very strong. If he can maintain his talent, becoming a Sky Knight at the age of 16 will not be difficult. He could even become a Dragon Knight candidate. List was a little embarrassed by the Earl's flattery, so he led the topic to Marquis Bull. Marquis Bull had been captured by the Grand Duke, and his fate was unknown. His son had died in battle, but his grandson and close confidants had long since left Iron Hoof Island, and their whereabouts were unknown. As for the great mages of the Goat Gathering, they had no idea where they had escaped to. The assassination of the Sapphire Dragon came suddenly, broke out suddenly, and the outcome was unknown. "How do you know?" "I once found a set of mithril armor in Marquis Bull's study in Juniper Castle. There was a sentence engraved on it, Iron Knight André Sapphire. It was completed in the autumn of 149. The first set of mithril armor was given to Lord Grandfather. The Earl pondered for a moment. I know André. He was indeed 12 years old in 149. A 12-year-old Iron Knight is indeed a genius, almost on par with your performance. Perhaps one day he will become a threat to the Sapphire family, but with the Grand Duke riding on a dragon, there is no need for us to worry. I'm not worried. Regardless of what happens to the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, the strength that one has cultivated is the foundation of one's foothold in this world. The fact that you can think like this proves that you have indeed matured. The Earl did not dwell on the topic of Marquis Bull for long, and soon returned to List. The Earl carefully inquired about the situation of fighting energy in List's body. In the end he came to the same conclusion as List. He was indeed advancing to a Sky Knight, and there were indeed no obstacles in the way. Such a smooth advancement method, List, even I am beginning to envy you. When I advanced to a Sky Knight it took me an entire month. I don't know how much magic potions and energy I consumed before I broke through the barrier between mid-level and high-level fighting energy and successfully advanced. Perhaps I am standing on the shoulders of giants, and with your training experience I am more at ease. I am more willing to think that this is the blessing of the Knight's glory. You are indeed the son of glory, the pride of the Tulip family. The Earl patted him on the shoulder, and his tone became more and more gentle. Your future is destined to be more wonderful than I imagined. I hope to see the day when you surpass me. Such a sentimental and warm scene. Chapter 479. After the battle with the Count, the news that List was about to be promoted to a Sky Knight quickly spread in the Tulip fleet. Eunice, Trick, and others also directly asked List and got a positive answer. Incredible, Viscount List, you are ahead of all of us. I'm just one step ahead. Viscount List, I am doomed to be a Sky Knight in this life. Perhaps this is the gap between bloodlines. You have inherited the noble bloodline of the Count and Marquis Merlin. I think so too. My family has brought me the foundation and I have brought all my talents into play. Flattering the limelight, just deal with it. List put aside his complacent mood and continued to devote himself to his training. Fortunately, the Count understood his current predicament and sent him a batch of black tulip potions. Of course, this cost money, and it was impossible to give it away for free. He now has a budding magic fire seed, and no matter how many potions there are, they can be sucked dry by the magic fire seed in his heart. The hunted Windblade Wolf and Black Bat World of Warcraft meat have also been consumed in large quantities. Coupled with the brewed dry milk powder and the little food left in the gem space, the nutrition can barely keep up. The amount of food he had eaten alone was more than what 2 Trembling Woods could eat. In terms of quality, he eats better than the entire Blizzard Beast squad. It's not difficult to raise a Sky Knight, but to raise a dragon. I can't imagine how much nutrition will be needed after the magic fire seed germinates further. Fortunately, those problems can be left for the future, and now he can still afford to raise himself. With the constant changes in his chi, when he sailed to Ironhoof Island to replenish his supplies, he was about to complete the change in nature, and his mid-level chi was about to become a high-level chi. Every time he trains on the deck, he feels like he is floating and can fly thousands of miles at any time. But there is still one more step to go. What does it feel like to be a Sky Knight? His personal guard, Black Dragon Gang Light Magician Paris, was very curious. I haven't reached the level where I can completely interpret the realm of a Sky Knight, but the feeling of a Sky Knight being able to fly is wonderful. List stepped onto the ground of Oxhoof City's harbor, feeling the satisfaction of returning home. They set off at the beginning of October and returned home in mid-December. The war that had lasted more than 2 months had brought back too much emotion. How I wish I could also practice fighting energy. I also yearn for the sky. Paris followed List's words and also had a lot of emotions. Find a flying World of Warcraft, tame it, and experience the thrill of flying in the sky. Will your Chocobo Loki evolve to the point where it can fly? Paris suddenly asked. It's getting bigger and bigger and its wings are getting longer and longer. It looks like it's going to fly at any time. I also look forward to the moment when it can fly. They talked and talked. Paris said with a little sadness, your cultivation speed is too fast. I'm afraid that even if I transform into a Black Dragon Gang, I would still not be your opponent. My identity as a guard doesn't make much sense. It's still meaningful. You can steal a lot of information on the battlefield. However, you are a woman, and it is really inconvenient for you to live on the battlefield with our knight. List turned around, looked at Paris and said seriously, in the future you will stay in the territory, patiently study light magic, And by the way, serve as a territorial guard of Black Horse Island to protect the territory. Let me guard Black Horse Island? Yes, I intend to set up a patrol orders of chivalry on Black Horse Island. You will be the leader. In the future you can take the official route. For yourself and for your sister, you should fight for the aristocracy. Aristocracy? Paris was a little silent but finally nodded. Do I need to pledge allegiance to you? List nodded. If you want to integrate into Black Horse Island, pledging allegiance to me is the most appropriate way. Okay. She thought about it carefully and made a decision. I used to hate the nobles the most in addition to the magician. I didn't expect that I would not only become a magician, but also prepare to fight for the aristocracy. Viscount, when I return to Flower Town, I will pledge allegiance to you. We have known each other for so long, there is no need to be polite. When you are ready, you will pledge allegiance to me. Making such a decision meant a change in identity. She used to be an employer and employee, but now she would have the relationship of a follower and a lord. It also meant that she had resisted the will of the world and eventually succumbed to the hierarchical knight system of the world. After replenishing the supplies, they set sail again. On the third day of sailing, Liszt, who was meditating, suddenly opened his eyes. Just a second ago, the chi in his body finally completed the complete change. At that moment, he only felt that all the chi was ignited in an instant, burning along the meridians from the pores to the cell nuclei. The flames were connected and the chi was also integrated into one. With a little movement, he felt as light as a swallow. He suddenly walked out of the cabin, and under the watchful eyes of Dosen and the 8 little ones, he stomped on the deck. In the next second, his whole body shot into the sky like a rocket. Chi gushed from the inside out, allowing his body to overcome the shackles of gravity and climb upward. The wind whistled in his ears. Lowering his head slightly, he suddenly saw that the tulip had become small. The many ships around it had also become small. Fortunately, I am not afraid of heights. If there was a Sky Knight who was afraid of heights, I am afraid that I would be crippled. As Liszt soared, he was still operating his chi. He had read the high-grade chi secret manual, Rising Red Sun, and could already recite it backwards. This high-grade chi secret manual not only introduced the way to operate chi, but also how to use high-grade chi to soar into the sky and release sword moves in the air. He only needed to operate his chi according to the special route recorded in the secret manual, and his body would be able to glide steadily. When the degree of continuation of the chi operation reached the limit, he immediately stopped the operation, began free fall, and operated a new chi route. His body stopped falling and slid towards another sail. Boom. When he landed, the chi gathered at his feet, allowing him to stand firmly on the deck. However, the huge impact was not well controlled, and the deck was broken and the sailboat shook violently. Sir Viscount. The knight on the ship hurried to the bow deck and exclaimed one after another. Don't be nervous, I'm just practicing. You continue with your business. He smiled faintly, calmly leaped, and once again soared into the sky, leaving behind a group of knight, dumbfounded. Heavens, Viscount Liszt really promoted to a Sky Knight. A 17-year-old Sky Knight, the bloodline of the Tulip family, sparkling. Powerful, handsome, Knight of Glory, no one is more noble than Sir Viscount Liszt. I have witnessed the Sun of Glory with my own eyes. Coral Island's second Sky Knight. 2 years ago, who could have thought that such a moment would happen? Chapter 480. Once again soaring, Liszt landed on the deck of the Tulip. This time he controlled the impact of the fall and did not trample on the newly repaired deck. The Count was already waiting at the bow. After seeing Liszt land, he took a deep breath and exclaimed, "I am proud of you, my son." After saying this, he suddenly realized that he had said this to Liszt several times during this time. The pride that Liszt brought him was one thing after another. "Thank you, father. When we return to Tulip Castle, I will hold a grand banquet for you and announce the good news to all the aristocrats and commoners of Coral Island." "As you wish." Liszt readily accepted the good advice. Then he accepted the congratulations of all the aristocrats on board. Everyone knew that the Grand Duchy of Sapphire was a rising aristocratic star. At this moment, no one doubted whether Liszt could reach the current achievements of Count Lee William in the future. He could create a new family at any time. Creating a family and carrying forward the bloodline was an incomparably glorious thing for the aristocrats of this world. Liszt did not understand before, but after communicating with the Count, he realized that the Count was looking forward to such a thing. It meant that the Tulip family would continue to grow and achieve new achievements. Just like when the Count changed the family name to Tulip, it was a glorious moment. The sailboat his followers were riding quickly approached. Marcus and others boarded the Tulip and offered a song of loyalty to List. It was lively for a long time. Even though the ship was simple and crude, a banquet was still held. Everyone drank until they were drunk. List was no exception. He was very excited and the aristocrats kept urging him to drink. He drank one cup after another until he finally fell asleep on the table. The night passed. As usual, he woke up early in the morning. As an ordinary sky knight, his body's strong resilience made him not feel the slightest hangover. In high spirits, he watched the sailboat sail towards Coral City's port. He really wanted to fly over and show off his new identity, but he restrained this impulse. The image of nobility needed to be maintained and one could not be too complacent. Disembarking from the ship, he immediately mounted Loki, a chocobo that had grown a size, and set off behind the Count. Along the way there was no doubt that he received far more attention than the Count. It was not only because he was handsome and had an outstanding temperament, but also because Rocky, who was under him, was extraordinarily valiant. His body had doubled in size and he was almost 4 meters tall. His legs were almost 1.7 meters tall and his neck was 1.5 meters tall. His body was less than 1 meter tall, but compared to his previous round body, his body was more flat and streamlined. The biggest change was its wings. They grew longer and longer, reaching a wingspan of 6 to 7 meters. Because the changes occurred during the voyage, he has not recalculated Loki's current physical condition, but from the appearance alone, he has conquered everyone's eyes. Loki used to walk beside Dosen, but he still seemed a little indifferent. But now that Loki and Dosen were walking side by side, the average person would not be able to tell which was the intermediate World of Warcraft. Dosen's tonnage and area were larger, while Loki's height and body length were longer. Each had their own merits and they were evenly matched. However, Loki's bloodline evolution had not yet been completed. He still had room for growth and his momentum was just around the corner, surpassing Dosen. After all, he would be an intermediate dragon in the future. Fortunately, 2 bloodline fruits in a row allowed him to successfully evolve World of Warcraft, and he did not explode and die. Perhaps the smoke mission is stirring the threads of fate, changing the fate of Dosen and Loki. List could only understand it this way. Surrounded by civilians on both sides of the road, the triumphant knight rode tall horses, and slowly galloped towards Tulip Castle with their heads held high. Every triumphant return was a good opportunity to promote the dignity of the knight. The solidification of the aristocratic and civilian classes, under such edification, continued to build, although he tried to deny it in his heart. But List still enjoyed the feeling of riding a horse through the streets. What people pursue in life is nothing more than fame, fortune, and beauty. Now such a scene is not the best reward for fame. Everyone wants to be the focus of attention, the difference is whether they can become it or not. Now he had the opportunity to become, and he did become the focus. The whispers of the commoners always revolved around him and his mount, Loki. There were also many children whose envious gazes followed his back all the time. When I grow up, I want to be as powerful as the Lord Knight, riding a big bird. A child announced loudly. The older companions laughed in unison. Ha, you're still riding your own pet. Maybe you can ride a big bird when you're dreaming. That's World of Warcraft's big bird. It can eat you in one bite. A young man, obviously well-informed, proudly showed off. Don't even think about it, that's the great Tulip family's bloodline, the ruler of Black Horse Island, Lord Viscount. He is the son of Glory of Coral Island, and no one is more favored by the glory of the night than him. The child said, "Ah," and stopped talking. When young and ignorant, everyone has a dream that doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, but growth means compromise. In constant compromise, gradually deviate from their dreams, and can no longer become the person they want to be. Fate does not need to be attacked, it only needs to slowly wear down the fighting spirit. Eventually, the bowed head will announce that not everyone can hold the throat of fate. Of course, if the heart does not give up, hope will not disappear. The world still leaves a glimmer of hope for progress for civilians, driving countless civilian knights to flock to the battlefield for this glimmer of hope. Some people would remain on the battlefield forever, dying on the battlefield, while others would return in glory. There was no doubt that List was also a man of glory. By the time they reached the intersection of Tulip Castle and Coral City, the team to greet them had already assembled at the intersection. Just like the last triumphant return of the Iron Hoof Island, Madame Penelope, Madame Marie, Ulvera, Levis, and the Loria couple were all standing at the front of the team. "Mother, I have made you worry." Lee William dismounted first and bowed to Madame Penelope. Every time he saw his mother come to greet him, he would bow like this. The aristocracy is full of exchanges of interest. There is also affection. Madame Penelope smiled and said, I am not worried about you, you always stand on the winning side and have never disappointed me, from the beginning to the present. Immediately after the Count, Liszt, who had dismounted from the bird, also walked over quickly. Grandmother. Strong young man Liszt, you have become taller and more handsome. Madame Penelope was very happy. She pulled Liszt's hand and chattered, in the past, when Li William went to the battlefield alone, I was not worried about his safety, but worried that he would be lonely outside. Now that he has his sons to accompany him, father and son fighting side by side, he will no longer be lonely. Li William faintly smiled. Mother, Liszt can already fight side by side with me. You definitely can't imagine what kind of surprise he will bring us. If you have something to say, quickly say it, don't delay. Madame Penelope bluntly scolded. The others also paid close attention, waiting for the Count to finish his words. The Count had long been accustomed to Madame Penelope's attitude, so his smiling expression didn't change in the slightest. Liszt has been promoted to Sky Knight. Boom. The team to greet them in triumph instantly became restless. Chapter 481. Sky Knight. Levis opened his mouth wide, his expression full of disbelief. Father, are you saying that Liszt has become a Sky Knight? Loria grabbed his arm and also exclaimed with her mouth wide open. As the future mistress of Tulip Castle, she had always believed that Levis was the most talented one in the Tulip family and that Levis would be the leader of the Sky Knight. She didn't expect that Liszt, who had an emotional entanglement with his sister, would suddenly erupt. Madame Marie's eyes widened. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were full of distrust. Her son Lytton couldn't hide his fear. Even though Madame Marie taught him to respect his second brother, he still disapproved of Liszt, who had been conferred the title of Viscount. Because of his talent, he was highly regarded by the Count, making him think that he was the genius. There was no doubt that in his eyes, Levis was just a mediocre person, and Liszt was even more of a waste. However, at this moment he heard frightening news. The second waste son of the Tulip family had become a high and mighty Sky Knight. This was a height that many knights could only dream of but not reach. Even those geniuses would find it difficult to attack a Sky Knight without sufficient resources. Why is it like this? Why is it like this? Why is it like this? Lytton's head was dizzy as this question echoed in his mind. He felt that all the strength in his body had dissipated, and he was about to lose his balance. He was flustered, stifled, and very uncomfortable. However, no one cared about his current feelings. Even his mother, Madame Marie, was nervously watching Liszt, wanting to hear Liszt personally say, Sky Knight. Madame Penelope pulled Liszt's hand and didn't let go. My young man, is what your father said true? Olvera rushed over and grabbed Liszt's other hand. My dear brother, are you really a Sky Knight, a powerful knight who can fly in the sky? In the face of everyone's concern and expectations, Liszt really wanted to wipe the unnecessary sweat off his forehead. He was a little overwhelmed by the enthusiasm of his family. He preferred the faint admiration in their eyes rather than the warm concern. But he still maintained his usual demeanor and showed the perfect standard aristocratic smile. Yes, grandmother, I have advanced to Sky Knight, completed during the recent voyage. Right now, I'm an ordinary Sky Knight. I can fly high in the sky and use high-level Do-Chi. His reply. It made those who were looking forward to it feel as if a huge rock had been lifted off their chests, and those who were jealous felt as if they had been hit by a stone hammer. But no matter what, the scene instantly fell into wild cheers. His family, no matter who they were, kept sending their blessings, and Madame Penelope hugged him and patted him on the shoulder. He was so tall that he had to bend down to let Madame Penelope hug him. After a while, Madame Penelope let go of his hand, tears faintly glistening in her eyes. Glory to the night, our Tulip family has finally given birth to a new Sky Knight. The glory of the family will not decline, but will flourish even more. Yes, mother, the Tulip family will grow stronger and stronger. The Count supported Madame Penelope and said loudly to the surroundings, the ceremony to welcome the triumphant return is over. The knights are dismissed and return to their territories to reunite with their families. The rest of you return to Tulip Castle first. Liszt straightened his back and was just about to turn over and ride Loki. Levis pulled him back. Liszt, I simply don't know what to call you. Sky Knight, you have achieved the height that I have dreamed of. Today you must talk with me until late at night. I have too many things about training that I need your advice on. Obviously. Since he could not return to the Flower Town today, he had to reply, Brother, if Luo Lia doesn't mind, I am very willing to exchange cultivation experiences with you. Luo Lia came over with a smile. I don't mind, List. I hope that you two brothers can have a pleasant chat. Olvera also came over. I also want to join. List smiled. No problem. One was an exchange, two was also an exchange. He did not mind sharing his successful experiences with his relatives. Although he believed that his success was not worth learning from. At most, he would tell them some of his summary of cultivation tips. He was very good at taking notes and using scientific methods to sum up problems arising from training. A thought flashed through his mind. Perhaps I can write a copy of List's Earth manuscript as a family heirloom to provide scientific reference for the cultivation of future descendants. At this time, at the instigation of Madame Marie Lytton, who was a little pale, approached and reluctantly smiled. Brother List, I also want to join you. Although I have not become an Earth Knight, I hope to get your guidance. No problem. The Count was not far away, and List was embarrassed to refuse, even if he was not pleasing to the eye with Lytton. He also had to take into account the Count's feelings and maintain a superficial brotherly relationship. So, he was escorted back to Tulip Castle. Using the excuse that he needed to tell his followers something, he was freed from the entanglement of Levis, Olvera, and Lytton. He called Marcus. Teacher Marcus, the construction plan of the territory, especially the new town plan on Black Horse Island, I told you on the ship. Do you remember it all? Today Marcus is more cautious in front of List. When he was an Earth Knight he didn't feel it. When List became a Sky Knight, he felt great pressure and infinite motivation. Yes, my lord. I may not be able to return to Flower Town immediately in the next few days. You pass my ideas to Blair Administrative Officer and let him send someone to investigate a suitable location for the new town. In addition, let Captain Harpagon of the Flower Caravan come over immediately. I have questions to ask him. Harpagon's Flower Caravan was not only engaged in trade but also involved in information exchange. It was basically equivalent to the Flower Town office in Coral City. If there was anything that needed to be understood, it was the fastest way to find him. A moment later, Harpagon rushed to Tulip Castle and reported the latest situation of Flower Town and Black Horse Island to List. The first question was List's biggest concern: whether the corn sprite was born or not. Harpagon replied, My lord, I don't know about the corn sprite. This is confidential information of the castle, and I dare not inquire about it. However, I haven't heard of any new sprites being born in the castle recently. Maybe you need to ask Mr. Carter or Advisor Gort. This was indeed the case. The sprites were an important asset of the Lord, and it was impossible to disclose information about the sprites casually. Therefore, List could only wait for Advisor Gort to receive the notice and rush to Tulip Castle as soon as possible to bring him news of the corn sprite. After listening to most of the construction of Flower Town and Black Horse Island, he sent Harpagon away. Back to Tulip Castle, he was the focus of attention. It was obvious that every time he came to Tulip Castle, his treatment had changed. When he first crossed over he was just a little invisible, then he gained the intermediate world of Warcraft and the Thorn Sprite and was valued, then he succeeded in becoming a baron on Black Horse Island and became a pivotal figure in the castle. Now, the treatment he enjoyed was almost as good as that of an earl. His family tried to be close to him, and the servants expressed their infinite respect. Chapter 482. The luncheon was very sumptuous. Even though the food style of Tulip Castle was not very to List's liking, he still ate a lot of World of Warcraft meat and various dairy products. During the war I felt hungry every day. Now that I'm back here, I can finally eat to my heart's content. Rubbing his stomach, he put down the fork in his hand in satisfaction. Madame Penelope said in a cheerful mood, From now on, we can no longer let a Sky Knight go hungry. The Tulip family may not be as good as those great nobles, but we can definitely provide enough food. Madame Marie also said with a smile, The castle's food, as long as it suits your taste, you can eat as much as you want. The focus was on List. The Count, a little jealous, said, Mother, I haven't had a proper meal on the battlefield. You are no longer growing, but List is still growing. Look, every time you see him, you will find that he has grown taller again. Are you 1.9 meters now? Madame Penelope casually dismissed the Count and changed the topic back to List. List shook his head, about 1.89 meters, and I feel that my height is starting to stagnate. My final height will probably be 1.9 meters. Levis said enviously, 1.9 meters is enough. Growing too tall will bring pressure to others. He was only 1.9 85 meters, which was now a head shorter than List. Olvera said with a smile. In our family, List has been blessed by the glory of the night since birth. You have all the advantages of the Tulip family and Taro family bloodline, height, appearance, talent. I was very jealous of you when I was a child, but now, it is difficult to even catch up to your back. I think Levis, Olvera, and Litton have all inherited the family's talent. As long as the supply of resources can keep up, there is hope for them to advance to Sky Knight. List replied. It didn't cost much to say a few words of flattery, so he was happy to encourage his brothers and sisters in this atmosphere. In the afternoon, Gort rushed over from the Flower Town. My lord, when I heard that you had advanced to the rank of a Sky Knight, I was so overjoyed that I almost went mad on the spot. As soon as they met, he began to flatter. When I followed you to Flower Town, I knew that you were deeply favored by the glory of the night. You are the son of glory. List maintained his smile. Gort's flattery continued unabated. In less than 2 years, you have achieved glory that many nobles could never achieve in their entire lives. Sky Knight, you are only 17 years old. This is a great joy for all the people on Black Horse Island. If they didn't stop him, Gort might talk for half an hour. He had to interrupt. Advisor Gort, becoming a Sky Knight is indeed a pleasant surprise, but now I want to know more about the territory. In the 2 months that I was away, did my corn sprite come into being? Is everything going smoothly in the territory? The corn sprite has not yet been born, but it has reached the final stage of the fat pupa stage and is motionless. We can't guess whether it has evolved successfully, but it has not decayed and disappeared. I believe that the time for success will come soon. That's good. Upon hearing this news, List was finally relieved. He had been thinking about the corn sprite for a long time. The fat pupa stage of the sprite was a key point. Failure, turning into ashes. Success, the sprite broke out of the pupa. Although the corn sprite had not yet broken out of the pupa, it had not turned into ashes either. It was still working hard to complete its evolution. What about other things? The new cordyceps of the rubber tree have reproduced a large number of seedlings around the roots. Blair has sent serfs to cultivate them within the influence of the cordyceps before the heavy snow comes. Now it seems that these seedlings are affected by the cordyceps and can safely survive the winter. Gort was now barely a qualified advisor of the territory, and most of the situation had been kept in mind. Overall, the territory had not changed much in the past 2 months, and there had been no gratifying progress in the various industries. There were not enough serfs, and the key industries could only barely be maintained, let alone other industries that had not yet been developed. The 2 batches of serfs have lost a total of more than 800 people. The actual number of serfs that have arrived safely is 16,316. For the time being, 8,000 serfs have been placed in the Flower Town and 8,000 serfs have been placed in the Port Town. They have not yet been assigned jobs and residences. Do we have enough houses for them to live in? In accordance with your instructions before participating in the development order, the carpentry workshop has urgently produced a batch of upper and lower beds. In this way, 8 serfs can live in a wooden house, barely placing everyone in the wooden house to resist the cold. However, there is still not enough clothing and many serfs are still suffering from the cold. Let the residents who have spare clothes first contribute the unused cotton-padded clothes, and then urgently purchase cotton-padded clothes from other places. The serfs have been transported back at a great cost. Even if they are lost during the voyage, I hope that none of them will starve or freeze to death when they arrive at the territory. Sir, I will try my best to arrange it. Not try your best, but it must be done. List said seriously, pushing the responsibility of solving the problem to officials such as Gort. In fact, the root of the problem was that he was too greedy and sent too many serfs, resulting in a lack of winter clothing. Gort thought about it and said, Sir, we are buying clothes like crazy. I am afraid that the price of all cotton-padded clothes and quilts on Coral Island will increase significantly. Don't be afraid to spend money. Advisor Gort, leave the money to me. All you need to do is to complete the construction of the territory according to my instructions. The money spent now will be multiplied in the future. There are too many profitable industries on Black Horse Island and Flower Town. I understand. Gort nodded. This winter, I will get all the officials of the territory to move and work hard to complete your instructions. As a superior, List rarely intervened in frontline work now. He only needed to command the officials of the territory. After a careful conversation with Gort, he stayed at Tulip Castle for the night and talked with Levis, Olvera, and Litton all night, exchanging cultivation experiences. He did not hide anything. He had explained all the problems he had encountered in his cultivation. He had also shared some ideas on how to use scientific methods to aid his cultivation with his brothers and sisters. In any case, the improvement of the strength of his brothers and sisters was not bad for him. They always had the same blood flowing in their veins. When the family is strong, everyone can be sheltered. There must be a way to cultivate qi, and there must be a way to take medicine. I have summed up the reason why my personal cultivation is so fast. There is no other reason. I am good at summarizing. List, like a teacher, spoke with confidence and assurance. What you are most concerned about is taking medicine. Tonight I will focus on how to take medicine. My knowledge of taking medicine comes from a large number of books bought by my father, grandfather, and myself. Everyone's way of taking medicine is different, but if you look carefully, you will find that there are common principles. He asked the servant to bring paper and pen. He wrote and drew on the table. This is a set of common principles. You can call it Lister's pharmacology. It specializes in the study of taking drugs. Constantly recording the feeling of taking drugs, knowing how to make tables and draw curves, and finally finding the most suitable dosage. He said it very seriously. Levis and the other two listened very seriously, their eyes shining from time to time. Perhaps they thought that by learning List's pharmacology, they could be promoted to Sky Knight as quickly as List. They were destined not to know. Chapter 483. Taking potions is an essential means of night training. Without the help of potions, it is difficult to break the shackles of the human body and accommodate more qi to transform the body. It is already amazing that scientific potions can promote less than 1/10 of the effect. Levis will become a Sky Knight sooner or later even if I don't teach him potions. As the eldest son of the Tulip family, it is impossible for him to stay at the Earth Knight stage forever. It is hard to say for Elvira. She has not entered the elite stage yet, so the possibility of her breaking through to the Sky Knight is relatively small. Night training not only requires a lot of resources, but also a persistent heart. Elvira's diligence in cultivation was not outstanding. It was probably because she was a woman that limited her desire to pursue strength. She would rather spend a lot of time with Madame Penelope to watch funny shows than diligently train qi every day. As for Lytton, he is still young and has not even become an Earth Knight, so it is difficult to judge his future achievements. However, he is only 13 years old and will only be 14 after the new year. His talent is indeed not inferior to that of Levis. As for List, it is not easy to compare. He was a loser when he was young, but now he is shocking. There is no clear record of a 17-year-old Sky Knight in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. Of course, he can't be compared to the Dragon Knight candidates of the mainland kingdom, but in the country, List can already be crowned with the title of unprecedented. Basically, these contents are all of List's potions. I will find time in the near future to write my training experience into a secret book as the inheritance of the Tulip family, List's Earth manuscript. You can borrow it to read when the time comes. I am usually very busy and have no time to answer your questions. Even the Count does not have time to care about the training of his children all day long. He is only a peer who has been in theft and has no obligation to teach them. Being able to write a manuscript for the family to read is already very responsible. After a night of chatting, List fully revealed his training experience in the elite Earth Knight stage. It wasn't until 3 o'clock in the morning that the exchange meeting ended. He took a shower, had a midnight snack and returned to his room to sleep. The next day was still a busy day. The Count said that he would hold a grand banquet for List to celebrate his promotion to a Sky Knight. Therefore, countless aristocrats of Coral Island were summoned to Tulip Castle to participate in the celebratory banquet. The focus of the banquet, List, was undoubtedly flattered for the entire day. Drunk as a kite. He didn't even have his evening training. The morning sun shone through the window. When he woke up, his body had completely recovered, and there was no hangover in his head. While he was washing up, he shook off the distractions of the past 2 days and began to sort out his future plans. Becoming a Sky Knight is just the beginning. I am now an ordinary Sky Knight. I still need to continue training, advance to the Sacred Swordsman level, advance to the Perfection level, and finally succeed in riding a dragon and become the Dragon Knight of my dreams. He was washing his face with cold water, which was more comfortable in winter. The biting cold water had no effect on him. The Sky Knight with a powerful physique had a strong resistance to cold and heat. However, the cold stimulated his brain to become clearer. There are 3 points to pay attention to in my training. One is the development of Dragon's Qi. How to breed a budding magic fire seed is an unavoidable topic. The other is the training of high-level Qi secret manuals. Flying and fighting must be followed up quickly. He took the towel handed by the servant and wiped his face. He was still pondering. The third is the issue of the Sky Knight's poison. In the elite Earth Knight stage, taking poison is a necessary means of training. But in the Sky Knight stage, poison is still a necessary means of training. I have to sum up a new poison plan as soon as possible. The training of Qi could be described as a boat sailing against the current, not moving forward or backward. So even if he became a Sky Knight, he could not stop taking potions, and the amount of potions would increase. Unlike mages who relied on meditation to condense the free magic in the air, they could live in solitude and concentrate on studying the truth. The knight's Qi was self-produced, and when a knight ruled the world, in order to consume Qi, they needed to constantly consume resources. War was also born. The amount of magic potions in my territory is obviously not enough. Unfortunately, there are not enough elves to expand the magic potion planting. In the future, this consumption will be huge. At this stage, the most suitable way to deal with it is to expand the scale of flame mushroom and snow flame mushroom. His territory had 5 magic potion planting projects: black tulip, fast-growing magic thorns, flame mushroom, snow flame mushroom, and the auxiliary medicine black nightshade. But black tulip, fast-growing magic thorns, and the auxiliary medicine black nightshade all needed elves to support them, otherwise the magic potions could not be planted. Only the flame mushroom and snow flame mushroom could continue to expand. Taking advantage of the cold snap, I should plant at least 500 mu of snow flame mushroom and 1000 mu of flame mushroom this winter. In the future, I hope that the flame mushroom can be quickly expanded to 10,000 mu. There are a lot of serfs coming, and I have enough manpower to learn how to grow flame mushroom. Flame mushroom cultivation required a lot of materials. But the cost of buying materials was not worth mentioning compared to the value of the magic potion. The only restriction was the cultivation technique. Serfs did not know how to grow mushrooms at all. Fortunately, List had been promoting the apprenticeship system in his territory, and the serfs in the Shiitake settlement had begun to take apprentices. Mushroom cultivation techniques slowly spread like wildfire. In addition, the thorn sprite Ella should all be arranged to plant fast-growing magic thorns. As for fast-growing iron thorns, they should be directly planted with ordinary wood. It has the effect of fast-growing, and it still has a great advantage over ordinary wood. Anyway, the carpentry workshop business is not very profitable. Ironwood quality furniture was still very popular, but it was difficult to sell the furniture of the carpentry workshop at a high price in a situation where all the aristocratic territories had their own carpenters. Sales could not be expanded, and the techniques were always quickly learned by other carpenters. So, from the analysis of costs and benefits, List hoped that the territory would develop industries with high returns, such as flour wine, flour soap, and the glass that was about to go into production. The masters of the Fire Dragon Brick Factory had been studying glass technology for several months and could produce barely qualified glass products. There were still many impurities and color flaws, but it did not prevent it from selling at a suitable price. The World of Warcraft breeding industry should also be developed quickly. The mangrove, green caterpillar and mallard duck industry must be expanded as soon as possible. Later, let a Qi take Nami to build more mangroves. It is also best to artificially raise the black giant clam and pink conch, especially actively planting pearls. He did not know how to grow the pink conch pearls, but the black giant clam could put impurities such as sand in the small shell to promote the black pearl. Finally, after washing up, he had already walked to the dining room and was ready to enjoy breakfast. List thoroughly sorted out the 3 major goals of the territory in the future: the high-profit manufacturing industry that earned cash flow, glass, liquor, and the like; the potion planting industry that provided him with potions, various potions, auxiliary potions, and the like; the breeding industry that provided his daily consumption of food, dragon dairy cows, mallard ducks, pink conch, and so on. Everything could be delayed. Only these 3 industries must be vigorously developed. Chapter 484. Now on Coral Island, no one can stop List from going anywhere, let alone back to his own territory. List declined the invitations of his aristocratic colleagues and directly took the retainer knight to Flower Town. The chocobo Loki, who had grown a size bigger, finally had the chance to let loose. "You take Dosen and the 8 little ones back to Flower Town. I will go alone, no need to follow me," he told the retainers and servants, stabilized the blizzard beasts, and then rode Loki like the wind. "Speed up, Loki." Cluck. The high IQ chocobo could understand many of List's commands. It immediately started running. Its 2 legs of about 1. 7 meters were like walking on stilts, and they were very stable. Even if only the afterimages of its legs could be seen, it still looked calm. The wind whistled in his ears. Loki's speed at the moment, List felt, was at least more than 300 kilometers per hour. Because from leaving Tulip Castle to seeing a small town on the outskirts of North Valley City, it only took 20 minutes. The distance between Tulip Castle and North Valley City was less than 100 kilometers. Originally, when Loki did not release magic, its top speed was 200 kilometers per hour, and it could only last for 10 minutes. Now it can run to 300 kilometers per hour, and it can last for 20 minutes. Looking at Loki, whose physical strength had reached its limit and whose speed had dropped significantly, List silently estimated. He let Loki rest for a while in the grove beside the road. He fed it some wheat and water. A quarter of an hour later, Loki clucked, announcing that its physical strength had been restored. List continued to drive it to complete other data calculations. Jumping in place, vertical height of 6 meters, horizontal length of 35 meters. Sprinting and jumping, vertical height of 5 meters, horizontal length of 90 meters. Such data could be called perfect. But when List allowed Loki to use the magic lighten body spell, its data became even more terrifying. It ran at a top speed of 500 kilometers per hour, like a bolt of lightning from the North Valley City to the Flower Town, stopping at the edge of the Thorns Forest and Thorns Ridge. When sprinting and jumping, the vertical height could reach up to 20 meters, and the horizontal length was more than 200 meters. It could almost be seen as flying close to the ground. The Sky Knight can fly up to 100 meters in the air. Loki is slightly worse, but Loki's speed is faster. It's almost the perfect mount for me. If only it could fly. It's a pity that it has such long wings and still hasn't learned how to fly. List was proud but also slightly regretful. Not being able to fly was always a flaw. When he rode Loki on Dawson Avenue, the patrol soon found him, and the news quickly spread throughout the town. At the entrance of the castle, Butler Carter had already hurriedly led the servants to welcome the return of the old master. "Master, welcome home." "Long time no see, Mr. Carter, Mrs. Morrison, ladies and gentlemen," List greeted the servants with a smile. Loki was handed over to the servant to be taken away to be fed, and Butler Carter entered the castle while talking and laughing. Without any delay, Zhang Xian headed straight for the worm room. Wow! Ella had known through telepathy that List had returned home. She flew out directly and yelled at List. She was very dissatisfied with List's disappearance for so long. Of course, there was also joy brought by List's return. "Ella, long time no see." List touched the small thorns on Ella's head and put it on his shoulder. List then saw the protected fat pupa corngrass worm. The original blue-yellow corngrass worm had now become a huge gray-yellow worm. Its skin had lost luster, and it was motionless. However, List could feel a strong life force pulsating under his skin. List cast magic eyes and saw that the magic power of the primal chaos was suddenly bubbling like boiling water. The bubbles burst one after another, and then there was an inexplicable change in nature. The huge fat pupa corngrass worm also expanded in an instant. Excitement came from it and deeply infected List's mood. Butler Carter stood behind him, saw the change and directly exclaimed, "Master, is this a successful evolution?" Yes, Ella was born in such a situation. List was full of smiles. It was a great surprise. He had just returned and the corngrass worm had begun its final evolution. Time passed little by little. The corngrass worm had grown to the thickness of a calf. Then, List's pupils suddenly widened as he saw the corngrass worm's skin change from gray-yellow to pale and suddenly burst open. Following that, a small pink pale yellow hand reached out from under the skin, followed by an arm and then a round little head. There was also a small corn on top of the head. The extremely beautiful little elf had already revealed her appearance. With curiosity about the world, it stretched out its head and looked around and finally fixed its eyes on List. It opened its small mouth and shouted, "Chirp." Its cry was different from Ella's more crisp voice, a bit similar to Nami's delicate cry. Wow. When Ella saw the newborn elf, she quickly flew up and was about to rush towards it. However, he was grabbed by List and placed on the side of the table. Then he issued a command to not move, and pouted his mouth in grievance. Then, with a smile on his face, List waved at the newborn elf. The corn sprite climbed out of the broken skin. Its chubby body shook and a pair of transparent wings stretched out. It flew up, circled the whole room and fell on List's palm. Chirp. It left the corngrass worm's skin. Before List touched it, it directly turned into dust and disappeared without a trace. A very gentle little elf. I can feel your calm heart. Looking at his third elf, List was filled with emotion. "Mr. Carter, look at it, isn't it beautiful?" "Yes, my lord, it is unbelievably beautiful, and I feel so lucky to be able to see the birth of a new fairy in my lifetime," Mr. Carter said, choking with sobs. The birth of the thorn sprite was a surprise for him. He had only heard of the mangrove sprite, and it seemed to be raised outside. Now this corn sprite was born with his own eyes. He regarded List as his closest person. He was gratified and happy for List's growth. List had a new elf and he couldn't help but cry. "Wow!" Ella cried on the table. But neither List nor Carter paid attention to it. They still looked at the pale yellow beautiful corn sprite. It should have been called the corngrass sprite. However, with the successive birth of corn, oil corn and cob corn, corn has become a large family. This year's harvest of corn, oil corn and cob corn has been reserved for large-scale cultivation during next spring plowing. Although the effect is not clear, there is no doubt that these three kinds of corn are good things. Even if the variety is not good, corn grass itself is a high-quality pasture. The corn sprite is very useful. Chapter 485. List really didn't think of a name for the corn sprite. The name of the thorn sprite, Ella, came from the rise of thorns. The name of the mangrove sprite, Nami, came from the tide mermaid. They were all heroes in League of Legends, but there didn't seem to be any heroes related to corn. It's not that there isn't any. Jigs, the dynamite genius, is related to corn. But the name Jigs is not cool enough, nor is it three-dimensional enough. Moreover, I remember that the manager of the fruit-stealing monkey training ground is called Jigs. It's awkward to call him by this name. So, after thinking for a long time, he couldn't think of a suitable name, so he just randomly picked one. Let's call it Mickey. List didn't know why it was called Mickey. Anyway, he thought of such a name and made it the name of the corn sprite. In fact, in the great noble families, the sprites generally didn't have a name. Just call them by their cordyceps name. After all, there were too many of them. But the tulip family was not that rich, so every sprite had a name. List naturally named his sprite. "Master, I'll send the news of Mickey's birth," Carter said with some eagerness. The birth of the sprite was obviously another glory worth celebrating. Go. However, before Carter went out, the town's officials had hurried to the castle. The officials led by Saya were notified by the patrol and quickly rushed to the castle. "Mr. Carter, is the master in the castle?" "Gentlemen, the master is welcoming the birth of the corn sprite, Mickey. I'm going to inform you." "What? The corn sprite has been born?" The officials who knew about it exclaimed again. God, the glory of the night, surprising things happen one after another. All the glory gathered on the master we follow. At this time, List came down from the second floor. There was a sprite sitting on each of his shoulders. On his left shoulder was the snow-white Ella, who was still angry with a flat mouth. On his right shoulder was the light yellow corn sprite Mickey, who was curious about the surroundings. Unfortunately, Nami was not here, otherwise there might be one on his head. Praise the master. Praise the Lord. The officials quickly began to bow. List smiled. You don't have to be so polite. Let's leave the celebration to future banquets. Now I'm more concerned about the development of the territory, especially the arrival of the new serfs and the arrangements for the incorporation of the knight and his family. Isaiah stepped out and said, "Sir, the knight has been taken to Black Horse Island by Captain Marcus. Except for a few Earth Knight instructors who stayed in Flower Town, the other knights went to Black Horse Island. Consultant Gort also went to Black Horse Island to settle the knight." "Then how are the serfs of the Flower Town arranged?" "In accordance with your instructions, Flower Town did not continue to cultivate wastelands, and most of the worm stalks were gradually transferred to Black Horse Island. Therefore, the new serfs were only temporarily arranged to live in Flower Town and renovated roads and wooden houses. When the new town of Black Horse Island is built in the future, they will gradually move there to farm. You officials must purchase materials and ensure that the serfs can survive this winter. I will find a way to get the gold coins." "Yes, sir." After accepting the compliments of the crowd and discussing government affairs for half an hour, List dismissed the officials. Just as the squires and servants had returned to Flower Town with the blizzard beasts, List arranged the blizzard beasts in their respective kennels, then left the castle and went to the magic workshop. His magic potions were not enough and he urgently needed Chris Truth to provide a new batch of magic potions. He also came here to pick up the magic books. He gave Chris a lot of gold coins to buy magic books. Therefore, the achievement of the bookmarking madman must continue. In case there is a new chi secret technique hidden on the cover of a book. There is no harm in scratching it. When he arrived at the magic workshop, Chris was not working. Instead, she was sitting in a rocking chair in the cold wind, looking at a withered tree not far away as the last leaf drifted down. "What are you thinking about?" List's voice interrupted Chris's wandering mind. She hurriedly got up. "Lord Viscount, you are back? I heard that you have successfully advanced to the rank of Sky Knight. Praise the Lord, this is an admirable achievement. I'm not lacking in talent and effort. It is natural for me to become a Sky Knight," List said lightly. In his own territory he did not need to be modest. "Lord Viscount, are you here to get the magic potion? I came to see you to understand your progress, to take some magic books back to read, and finally to get the magic potion." His purpose was, of course, the magic potion. But when speaking, there is no need to be so straightforward. He can adjust the order appropriately. Chris's face flashed with a hint of surprise, and then she replied, "I have been a little uneasy recently. It seems that my understanding of magic has reached a critical point, but there are always a few situations that I don't understand and need to be carefully considered. Don't worry, if there is any problem you can tell me. Although I am not a magician, I can consult other magicians. If I really can't solve it, I will ask Lord Viscount for help." "So, how many magic books did Mr. Elkson sell?" "I spent 30 gold coins to buy 3 boxes of magic books, mostly theoretical notes. And I spent 136 gold coins to buy 4 kinds of high-level magic and 8 kinds of ordinary magic, including a high-level light magic shadow projection, which is worth 40 gold coins. These magic books were directly handed over to the servants to carry to the castle. Chris then began to hand over the magic potions. Chris made the magic potions very quickly as long as the materials could keep up, and the consumption of the production was relatively low. But it was clear that the magic potion materials produced in the territory were still too little. She had only made a small batch of magic potions during this time. It was not enough for List to practice for half a month. So he still had to spend gold coins to buy magic potions from the outside. Although it was painful, he had to do so for practice. Fortunately, the balance of the sale of the black pearls could be recovered soon, the income of the flower wine could be obtained soon, and the production of glass was also put on the agenda. Otherwise, List would really have a hard time facing the construction of the territory. Take away the magic potions. Return to the castle. List immediately began to work on his achievement as a madman. The castle's current collection of books has been piled up one bookshelf after another, looking like a scholar's study. But in fact, except for the cracks in the covers, half of all the knight's novels and magic books were brand new. 1 book, 2 books, 3 books. He was like a diligent little bee, constantly cutting the covers to look for possible interlayers and metal papers. He hoped to get another secret skill. Unfortunately, however, until dinner he cut all the covers of the books, but still did not find the interlayer. Chapter 486. The dinner party was lively. Although the officials and Knight of Black Horse Island did not appear, the officials and Knight of Flower Town alone were enough to make the castle lively all night. However, in his territory List rarely drank. His majesty grew stronger and stronger. When he did not want to drink, his followers did not dare to persuade him to drink. At the dinner party there was another thing worth mentioning. His personal guard, Paris, officially declared her allegiance to him and became one of his many followers. List personally appointed her as the head of the Black Horse Island Patrol Orders of Chivalry. Paris's strength ensured that the Earth Knight, even if they were jealous of her high position, would not dare to provoke her. After all, she was one of the few people in the territory with the strength of an elite Earth Knight, and she was still comparable to a veteran elite Earth Knight. Even if Paris was a woman, there was no concept of the 3 obediences and 4 virtues in this world. There were many female knights, and the status of women in society was not necessarily much worse than that of men. It was just that there were very few women in the high-end combat force. Most women acted as territorial managers. Men charged and fought while women managed the manor. This was the standard. Paris, who had become a follower, was ready to pack up her things and follow List to Black Horse Island early tomorrow morning. For a long time to come, she would settle on Black Horse Island and take on her responsibilities. He looked at Paris, who was already using the terms of a superior and a subordinate. List was somewhat disappointed. The knight system was a society where the hierarchy was very clear. The definition of friend here was more like a partner who could bring benefits to each other. Ever since List crossed over to this world, he hadn't really made any friends. Butler Carter was his confidant. He wasn't a relative, but he wasn't a friend. Advisor Gort was his teacher and advisor of the territory, but he was only a follower. Captain Marcus was also a teacher and a follower. Levis was the elder brother and Meopal was the cousin, but they were not friends. The siren Chi was his sister. To be honest, the relationship between the two was somewhat similar to that of siblings and lovers. There was even a kind of twisted relationship between a master and a pet, but they were by no means friends. Only Paris, with her disdain for nobles, could be developed as a friend. But sometimes, because of the attraction of genders, there would always be a vague ambiguity. In the long run, it would be difficult to maintain normal communication. However, taking a step forward was not a result that Liszt was willing to see. He did not have such thoughts for the time being, so he decided to cut the Gordian knot. He didn't want to be entangled in his feelings. Dragon riding was the focus of his life. After the banquet, he took Dosen and the two elves to the seascape villa. The lights in the villa were still on, but Achi did not appear. He blew the horn for a while, but there was still no response from Achi. I don't know where Achi has gone. It seems that we won't be able to see her tonight. But just as he was about to turn back, a familiar horn sounded from the sea. It was Achi's response. After a while, Liszt saw the sea sprite that he missed so much. She was still as beautiful as before, without any signs of age. Brother? Achi threw herself directly into Liszt's arms. Her petite but plump body made Liszt instantly have a reaction that he shouldn't have. Even in winter, Achi still didn't need to wear clothes. Her body was a little cold but very soft. She could already skillfully control the hose to avoid wet Liszt's clothes when they touched. So, it meant that when they hugged, the hose did not exist. Her body was clinging to Liszt's clothes. Thinking of this, Liszt felt that his body was about to lose control again. He could only silently say, at least 3 years, the highest death penalty, and run his chi to eliminate the body's reaction. It took a lot of effort to barely control himself and not expose the restlessness in his heart. Chirp. The mangrove sprite was flying on the side. Seeing Achi happy, it was also happy. However, its expression soon froze. Because it saw the thorny sprite Ella, whose face was full of anger, staring at it with her fists clenched. The meaning of threat was self-evident. This reminded Nami of the first time they met, when Ella gave it a rough slap. It left a very deep shadow. It shrank its neck, lay on Achi's back and looked at Ella cautiously. Then its eyes turned to the corn sprite Mickey on the other side. Mickey was a gentle sprite. After a few chirp, chirp, it slowly flew towards Nami. Then the two little elves circled around each other. It was obvious that this was the first time they had met and they were very friendly. However, it was limited to a friendly greeting. Sprites were not social creatures and they did not have abundant social emotions. They were more attached to their contracted masters. Brother, Achi has a lot to say to you. After the hug, they could finally chat normally. Achi quickly jumped up and took out 5 sprite worms from the shell like a treasure. This. Liszt was almost speechless with surprise. 5 sprite worms were placed on the table. They were yellow-brown, purple-brown, pink, cyan yellow, and black-brown. They all looked the same, with 2 small gills behind their heads, suitable for survival in the water. Achi, where did you get so many sprite worms? Are they all contracted? These are all sprite worms in the deep sea, so Achi contracted them. However, Achi also found 2 sprite worms in the mangrove by the sea, waiting for brother to contract them. 5 contracted ones. 2 uncontracted ones. In other words, Achi had brought him 7 sprite worms. In addition to Nami and the kelp worm in this short time, Achi brought him a sprite and 8 sprite worms, which was simply a wholesale sprite. But soon, Liszt knew that he had misunderstood a sprite worm. The yellow-brown one was the previous kelp worm. Achi also brought the remaining 4 sprite worms. What did the sea plants look like? The purple-brown sprite worm, its body was a kind of wrinkled, flaky seaweed, a bit like the seaweed in the seaweed egg soup that Liszt had eaten. This sprite worm, for the time being, could be called a seaweed worm. The pink sprite worm, its body was a kind of translucent, gummy red plant, which grew on rocks looking like red flowers on rocks. It was probably also some kind of algae. This sprite worm, for the time being, could be called a redstone flower worm. The cyan yellow sprite worm, its body was a kind of algae commonly seen in the waters of the flower town. The oyster settlement's fishermen called it sargassum. This sprite worm, naturally, was called a horsetail worm. The black-brown sprite worm, its body could also be found on rocks by the sea at low tide. The fishermen called it inkhorn algae. This sprite worm should be called a inkhorn worm. Kelp worm, seaweed worm, redstone flower worm, horsetail worm, and inkhorn worm. The 5 sea sprite worms were an eye-opener for Liszt. These sea sprite worms seemed to have gills. Are they all algae? Are the sprite worms bred by algae all like this? For the time being, it was impossible to develop a sea breeding industry. List then asked the Chi, where are the other two sprite worms? Chapter 487. They chatted until midnight. Only then did he realize that Chi had not learned much about magic arrays in the past 2 months. She had been looking for sprite worms in the sea. The sea was far wider than the land, and the water depth could even reach thousands of meters. Chi only swam in the shallow sea area of 100 meters, and it was difficult to find plants in the deep water area. The laver worm, redstone flower worm, and inkhorn worm were not found in the waters near Black Horse Island, but in the waters near Coral Island. Now their worm stocks have been transferred by Chi to the waters around Black Horse Island. The horsetail worm was found in the waters of Flower Town and was also transferred by Chi to the waters of Black Horse Island. Chi, I appreciate your efforts to find sprite worms in the sea, but pay attention to safety. After all, there are many sea monsters in the sea. You can hunt low-level sea monsters, but mid-level sea monsters are very dangerous, not to mention high-level sea monsters and even super sea monsters. Brother, Chi has become very strong and can deal with mid-level sea monsters. No matter what, don't try to be brave, understand? List pinched Chi's nose. I hope that you can study magic arrays seriously and help me navigate the sea unimpeded when the era of big sea navigation arrives in the future. Even become a water mage as soon as possible. Chi nodded seriously. Brother, Chi understands. Chi will study hard, work hard to become stronger, and help brother navigate the sea safely. That's my good Chi. Early the next morning, List took the flowers to Black Horse Island. When passing by Mangrove Island, he drove the sampan directly and observed around the mangrove forest. Because of Chi's orders, the mangrove sprite warmly received List and guided him to the worm stalks and sprite worms in this place. This was the first time Nami had appeared in an environment with outsiders. It caused many people to exclaim. However, many people in the territory already knew of the existence of the mangrove sprite, so they were not too surprised. Soon, List found the sprite worm basking in the sun under the guidance of Nami. Its worm stalk was a small tree in the mangrove forest, near the sea. There was a long fruit hanging on it. Is this an autumn eggplant? List recognized at a glance that this tree was a very common tree species in the mangroves. In fact, most of the mangroves cultivated at the Red River estuary were planted with the seeds of the autumn eggplant. As it was a viviparous tree species, the seedlings would directly develop on the tree. After harvesting, it could be easily transplanted to other places. The fruit of autumn eggplant can't be eaten. It's bitter and poisonous. It's not as useful as Nami's mangrove. Its only function is to contribute seedlings and provide materials for the expansion of the mangrove forest. No matter what. What needed to be contracted still needed to be contracted. Sprinkle the jade powder, lure the green sprite worm to lick it, then stretch out its finger and take a bite. The contract is successful. It became List's 27th contracted sprite worm. He had a total of 29 contracted sprites, among which the thorn sprite worm and the corngrass sprite worm had evolved into lesser sprites. The 5 sprite worms contracted by Chi were not included. Captain Costo, don't go to Black Horse Port. Continue north. My mangrove sprite told me that there is a small island north of Black Horse Island with new sprite worms. Sir, Sprite is amazing, it can find new sprite worms. Captain Costo exclaimed and continued to sail north. In the evening, following the flowers, Chi continued to give hints and finally found the island. The island was very small, a little smaller than Mangrove Island. The mangrove forest was not as big as the mangrove forest of Mangrove Island, but there were many birds, mostly seagulls. We should drive away the seagulls and continue to raise green caterpillars and mallard ducks here. List stood at the bow of the ship, reached out and casually pointed, deciding the future of the island. Let's call it Seagull Island. After all, we have occupied their habitat and we must leave something to commemorate it. Sir, you are always so generous and kind. List chuckled. Captain Costo was earnestly flattering him, but it sounded a bit ironic to his ears. Occupying the seagull's habitat and only keeping a name, does this have anything to do with generosity and kindness? Anyway, soon Nami showed him the location of the sprite worm, which saved him the time to use magic eyes to observe. The worm stalk was also a small tree, and it was a common tree species in the mangrove forest. It was labeled goat's horn fruit tree. Although it was a fruit tree, the seeds of the fruit were poisonous. Its role was probably the leaves, which could be used as fodder to feed livestock such as cattle, sheep, horses, pigs, chickens, ducks, geese and other domestic animals. The plants in the mangrove forest were basically not of much value. So, he smeared the jade powder and quickly contracted the goat's horn fruit worm, making it the 28th sprite worm in List's hands. Whether they are useful or not, at least they can expand the mangrove forest and provide a habitat for the green caterpillars and mallard ducks. This is already a benefit. Finally, at night, the flowers sailed into Black Horse Port. The port town officials who received the notice, under the command of Gort, quickly organized a grand bonfire party to welcome the arrival of List. List also took the opportunity to encourage the officials of the territory. He also cared about the living arrangements of the incorporated knights on Black Horse Island, so that they could integrate as soon as possible and contribute to the construction of the territory. After the bonfire party, without taking a break, List directly held a territorial meeting. All the knights in political positions participated in the meeting. The main articles of the meeting were divided into two parts. One was the officials' report on the construction, and the other was the new town planning. The content of the report was nothing new, Gort had already reported it once. His main purpose was to determine the new town plan. Blair had been presiding over the matter, so he explained the planning plan prepared by the officials. Sir, the number of residents on Black Horse Island is estimated to be 20,000. According to the size of a town that can accommodate 5,000 people, we need to build 3 new towns. But to ensure that more residents can be accommodated in the future, we have planned 6 new towns. Hearing this, List could not help but nod. He had always advocated that officials should have advanced awareness and not just see the immediate point. To look at the long-term future and think about how the territory should be built and developed from an overall perspective. Now, the new town plan presided over by Blair was very good. 6 new towns, plus the growing port town, were enough to accommodate a population of 40,000 to 50,000, which could meet the development needs of Black Horse Island for several years. Seeing List nod. Chapter 488. The plans for the 6 new towns were constantly revised and finally approved with List's affirmation. According to this plan, the future administrative division of Black Horse Island has been clearly defined. The southernmost point is the port town, adjacent to Black Horse Harbor, which will be upgraded to a port city in the future. It is the central city of Black Horse Island, and List's new castle is on the edge of the city. The city would concentrate most of the industry in the territory and become a modern industrial city. In the northwest was Newport Town, which was adjacent to the undeveloped Newport Town and had the potential to be upgraded to a city in the future. It would be the starting point for List to explore the Aquamarine Sea and the Devil Sea. In the southwest was Green Tea Town, located at the foot of the Ice Grass Hill. A large piece of land was planned to be used as a green tea plantation. The town's future development would mainly focus on green tea. The easternmost part was the Red River Town, located at the mouth of the Red River. Next to it was the mangrove forest. The town's future development was mainly focused on the green caterpillar, mallard duck industry. The valley between Lamus Grass Mound and Needlegrass Mound was horse herding town, adjacent to the Black Horse pasture. The town's future development would mainly focus on animal husbandry. The valley between the Alfalfa Mound and the Ice Grass Mound was Thorn Town. In the future, the Thorn Garden would move to this place. Naturally, the town's future magic array would focus on planting thorns. At the westernmost end is Grain Town, located in the valley between Alfalfa Hill and Lamus Hill. It is planned to open up large-scale grain farms here as a food base for Black Horse Island. If the Flower Town was also taken into account, it was mainly for trade and had the potential to be upgraded into a trade city. Thus, List's territory plan had formed a structure of 8 small towns. The knight did not have enough meritorious deeds for the time being, so everything in the territory was his property. In the future, even if he were to grant some small towns and villages, they would be granted to poor places. Now that the plan was made, the next step was to arrange the construction. Many of the idle labor force of the serfs would be mobilized this winter to ensure that there was enough food and clothing to keep out the cold. This winter would not delay the project too much. The officials of the territory already had the experience of winter construction, so they knew how to arrange their schedule. List was not stingy. He immediately decided to plan several bathrooms for men and women in the port town and the new town to be built in the winter. He would use the magic of the fire dragon to heat them up so that the serfs could expel the cold from a day's work. As such, after the meeting in the evening, List summoned the smoke quest and found that it had been completed. Mission completed. Reward, peas that produce rhizobia. Immediately, a new quest was released. Quest. With the arrival of the mangrove sprite and the corn sprite, the thorn sprite feels that its status is threatened. It can only vent its anger through its fists. Please guide it to vent its anger correctly. Reward, 1 sprite worm. Well, Ella's anger is vented. List raised his eyebrows, looked at the mission reward, connected with the mission content, and vaguely had an idea. Should I tell it to vent its anger on farming so that it can get the best love from me? Or have it influence the thorns to breed new sprite worms? It was hard to say whether lesser sprites could influence the birth of sprite worms of the same kind. However, according to his observations from the tulip family, there was more or less such influence. Tulip Castle not only had a great tulip sprite, but also 2 tulip lesser sprites, 1 was given to Elvira, and 8 tulip worms, 2 were given to Elvira. In addition, there was a tulip worm which was given to List. In other words, the tulip family obviously had an abnormal number of tulip sprites. This was certainly related to the large number of tulip sprites planted by the family, but it was also the result of other greater sprites and lesser sprites influencing each other. In any case, I have to guide Ella to apply her temper to farming so that it doesn't cause trouble for Mickey. It is best if it can really help breed new thorns worms. With 1 more thorns worm, I can produce more than 100 acres of fast-growing magic thorns. Ella planted 800 acres of fast-growing magic thorns, and the new thorns worms planted another 100 acres of fast-growing magic thorns. Relying on the thorns potion alone, it was probably enough for a third of List's potions. Counting the flame potion, ice flame potion, black potion, and black nightshade auxiliary potion, it was enough to cover half of what he needed. He did not stay long on Black Horse Island. The next day, after inspecting the crowded dormitories of the serfs, he left Black Horse Island by boat and returned to Flower Town. After eating, drinking, and training the Blizzard Beast, he began to guide Ella to establish the correct morality, values, and elf outlook on life. Ella, I know you don't like other sprites, but you need to know that they are all my sprites. You can't hurt any of them. Ella retorted, wow. Its emotions showed that it wanted to teach Mickey and Nami a lesson. Snap. List aimed at its head and used his finger-flicking god art. Wow. Ella made a fierce expression and bluffed to scare List, but its actions were useless. Snap. List used his finger-flicking god art again. Wow. Snap. Wow. Snap. Whoa. Ella finally gave in and covered its head, not daring to make any more noises. After subduing Ella's violent temper, List began to persuade it. Ella, do you know how to make me like you? You have to plant your thorns. I need thorns and you can cultivate them so I will like you. If you can find thorns to help you, I will like you even more. Well, Ella was a little unclear. List had to pull out a thorn vine, make a happy expression, then pointed to Ella and then pointed to the thorns. Ella was stunned for a moment, waved her little hand, sowed a green light, and suddenly the thorns sprouted again. Seeing this, List decisively kissed it. Ella laughed and was very happy with List's kiss. So, he cast his magic even more happily, making the thorny vines grow even more tender shoots. Basically, List has made it understand that thorns are equal to kisses. The next step is to guide it to cultivate the 800 acres of Thorns garden to vent its dissatisfaction. At this time the corn sprite Mickey was needed. List deliberately treated Mickey well, provoking Ella's anger. Then let Ella plant thorns so that it would perform better. This requires a period of edification. List only stayed in Flower Town for a day, then had to interrupt training and go to Tulip Castle to participate in this year's celebration banquet. The Count retitled several Lord Knight, and a Lord Knight was conferred as the new Baron. Then there was the distribution of minerals. The minerals were distributed to the Lord after the Grand Duke collected taxes. Although there were not many mines plundered this time, List was second only to the Count in terms of military merits. He was given 50,000 pounds of iron and some copper, tin, aluminum and other metals. Metals can not only be used to make weapons and tools, but also very practical magic materials. After a night of revelry, the first heavy snow of the year came quietly at night. Early the next morning, List stepped on the snow and returned to his territory. This time he would stay in the territory for a long time without going out. Chapter 489. The heavy snowfall quickly wrapped the Flower Town in silver clothes. Only the roads were clear. Officials were organizing the serfs who had nothing to do, constantly clearing the snow on the roads, so that the roads of the whole town in all directions were unimpeded. At the same time, part of the road was still under construction, using the rocks produced by the blizzard beast, constantly breaking them into stones and paving them on the road. The main road of Flower Town has been expanded to the width of 4 carriages side by side, and the roads between the villages are enough to accommodate 2 carriages side by side. While other towns generally had muddy roads, the Flower Town had already modernized its transportation. Because the Lord Viscount List always remembers the slogan, "If you want to be rich, build the road first." If the road is not clear, the development of Flower Town will always be limited. Infrastructure construction certainly requires a lot of money, but it is definitely a great addition to economic development. List even has a plan to cooperate with Tulip Castle to build a gravel road from Flower Town to Coral City, further shortening the travel time between the two places. However, this road is costly and the Count may not agree. At least until Black Horse Island has not exploded into a huge economic volume, so that the trade between the two places continues to increase, this road will probably not be built. People in this world do not have the concept of infrastructure in their minds. Whether the serfs walked on the gravel road or on the mud road, whether they stepped on the green grass or on the dirty water of excrement and urine. For the nobles, what difference does it make? Only List will desperately build infrastructure. On Black Horse Island, he has planned a number of future roads for 4 carriages side by side, 4 lanes for short. There must be a 4-lane road between every 2 towns. In the future, after Port Town and Newport Town are developed and upgraded into cities, a direct 6-lane road will be built. He believes that the future industry of Black Horse Island needs such a road to support it. On this day, there was good news again. The serf who found the pea cordyceps reported to the administrative office the magical changes that had taken place in his peas. The influence of the pea cordyceps could keep the peas growing in autumn and winter, but with the removal of the pea cordyceps, the remaining peas in his house could no longer thrive. Now that the bean sprouts were dead, the serf was ready to pull out the bean sprouts and collect the mature peas as seeds. These peas were well developed and were excellent seeds. However, when he pulled out the root of the pea, he found that there was a tumor the size of a fingernail. The serf remembered that the Sir Lord, who had come to transplant the cordyceps, had mentioned that there were rhizobia in the roots of legumes that could increase production. So he excitedly reported his findings. The officials from the administrative office had naturally heard List's explanation of the benefits of rhizobia to the soil and plants. Therefore he immediately reported to the castle and reported to List. A lot of tumors the size of fingernails? List immediately understood that this was the reward of the previous smoke mission. Peas that produce rhizobia. He immediately led the retainer knight to the serf's house and saw the peas. The roots of the pea were very fluffy, and there were indeed a lot of nodules on it. Not only were there a lot of them, but they were also very big. Compared to the soybean roots that List had seen on Earth, the nodules were much more abundant. He immediately ordered the serf to pull out all the peas and found that there were more than 20 peas with abundant nodules on their roots. The rest of the peas were very ordinary. Collect all of these nodules and carefully preserve them. When you sow peas, soybeans, peanuts, and so on next spring, remember to plant them in the soil stirred by these nodules. In addition, buy all of these pea seeds and plant them near the pea cordyceps as the focus of next year's cultivation. Yes, sir. The official hurriedly recorded List's instructions. The new variety of peas was named by List as fungus peas, which meant that the peas could produce rhizobia. He believed that with the continuous cultivation of fungus peas, the rhizobia that List hoped for would be produced in large quantities, increasing the yield of all legumes and improving the fertility of the soil. There are now more and more new varieties of crops in the territory. On the way back, he suddenly thought of the many new varieties of crops that had been born on this land in the past 2 years. The first was black tulip, followed by corngrass, smoke grass. Smoke grass probably couldn't be counted as it should also grow in other areas. After all, List knew it from a night novel. Flame mushroom, ice flame mushroom, and then fast-growing thorns. Fast-growing thorns started the trend of crop mutation and formed List's unique naming method. All of a sudden, 5 new varieties were formed: fast-growing thorns, fast-growing poisonous thorns, fast-growing thorny thorns, fast-growing iron thorns, and fast-growing magic thorns. Rubber trees formed 2 new varieties, rubber fruit and rubber fan, a new cordyceps variety, currently unknown for what purpose. Corn grass formed 3 new varieties, corn, corn oil corn, and corn cob. Now, peas formed a new variety, fungus peas. In addition, there are also black nightshades, mutated auxiliary black nightshade. These new mutated varieties of crops are named with nature plus original name to form new names. It's really an interesting name, distinct, clear at a glance, concise and comprehensive. He was very satisfied with his naming ability. Fungus peas were just a small episode. The chaos caused by the arrival of a large number of new serfs in the territory quickly stabilized, and there was no need for List to worry about it. He resumed his previous schedule and lived an ordinary but fulfilling life. Recently, his greatest pleasure was to train the thorn sprite, Ella, and make it an elf again. Without the hint of the smoke mission, List probably couldn't think of how to educate the elves. He would only think that the elves were simple farming tools and would not want to carry out ideological transformation. Now that he thought about it, sometimes spiritual power should not be underestimated. It can brainwash and educate humans and burst out great work productivity. Why not brainwash and educate the elves? He has the experience of educating blizzard beasts. Therefore, he enjoyed educating Ella and constantly guided it to vent its anger on planting thorns. After 5 days of training, Ella finally fully adapted to the new way of behavior. Whenever it didn't like other sprites or was angered, it would run to the Garden of Thorns, consume magic power and promote the growth of thorns. Good girl? List would give it a loving encouragement, rewarding it with a word of encouragement, a caress or a little food. Ella was very happy. Then he called out the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward, a thorn sprite worm. Not surprisingly, List had been in the Garden of Thorns every day recently, and the reward of the smoke mission was indeed born in the Garden of Thorns. It was a fast-growing demon thorn that had undergone a transformation. A large tumor had grown out of its branch. Magic power gathered inside, apparently gestating a sprite worm. It looks like it has been gestating for many days. It doesn't look like it has just been gestating. It doesn't seem to be affected by Ella? List wondered. Thorns are evergreen plants that grow slowly in winter. Because the potion itself has magic power, List did not notice the abnormality of this potion before. Now, judging from the degree of magic convergence, it has been gestating for at least half a month. Anyway. Chapter 490. This chapter is Smile Faintly, added bonus. With the thorn's worm reward in hand, List looked at the new task. Almost as soon as he finished reading, he exclaimed because the task reward was very unexpected. Task: the construction of the territory is in full swing, but there is a lack of transportation. Transporting materials costs manpower and material resources. As a lord with a very broad vision and a rich reserve of knowledge, why not find a way to solve this problem and invent a new type of cart to save transportation costs? Reward: the fallen sky ship. The task content was unremarkable. The so-called transportation that saved manpower and material resources was not difficult at all in his view. Cars and trains were unlikely, but bicycles and tricycles could still be made. However, he had a more worry-free solution: the unicycle cart. This was the transportation he had wanted to invent for a long time. For a long time, List did not implement many of his inventions. He always felt that he had been tinkering with modern civilization technology. If it was learned by others, it would not be worth it. Because he was only a small noble, he could not protect his industry and the fruits of his labor. However, now he was a sky knight and had the Earl as his backing. In the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, it was a powerful force that could protect his achievements. Therefore, he planned to develop those inventions step by step: wheelbarrows, crooked plows, white paper, perfume. He even wanted to introduce entertainment industries: poker, mahjong, football, drama, and so on. As long as he could make money, he could do anything. Of course, these inventions needed to be done slowly and could not be rushed. After all, everything in the territory was still in its initial stage, and there was no spare energy to develop new industries. He shook his head. His attention was more focused on the reward of the smoke task. The fallen sky ship, what does this mean? Does it mean that there is a sky ship flying in the sky and suddenly fell into my territory? Or a sky ship that has long fallen and was found somewhere in the territory? He grasped the key point of the reward. So, what is a sky ship? There was a memory in his mind, quickly emerging. It was the first volume of the poem in The Diary of a Descendant of the Sun. The author, Philip, wrote a paragraph like an article and a poem on the first page of the diary. On Grandpa's back there was such a tattoo. He said that his father had the same tattoo on his back. I asked him, why isn't there one on my father's back or mine? He said, our ancestors have abandoned us, the sun pattern we can no longer bear. I don't know what it means. Grandpa said that we were exiled from our hometown to the land of sin, and we could only return after 500 years. 500 years later, there will be a ship sailing in the sky under the sunlight to welcome us back. 500 years had passed, but the sky ship never came. It was not difficult to understand the meaning of this poem. Philip's ancestors came from a continent outside the Devil's Sea. They called themselves the children of the sun, and this race probably mastered the profound use of magic. This could be seen from the fact that they could produce exquisite magic equipment like the floating bottle. They were brought to the Dodu Island by Lu Feng, and agreed that after 500 years, they would be cleansed of their sins, and someone would come to pick them up on a ship in the sky. But he didn't. So, the sky ship is some kind of vehicle created by the sun's child? Do they rely on flying ships when they go to sea? And I'm about to obtain a fallen sky ship? Or could it be that the sky ship that came to pick up the descendants of the Sun clan is flying towards me and will fall down by accident? He imagined all kinds of possibilities in an instant, but because there were too few clues he could not be sure. He could only complete the task as soon as possible and prepare for defense. Who knew what the origin of the sky ship was, whether there really was a race called the Children of the Sun, and whether it would pose a threat to the territory? He quickly issued an order to send a letter to Marcus on Black Horse Island, telling him not to slack off in the training of the night squad. He also told Paris to form patrol orders of chivalry as soon as possible and to start guard patrols on Black Horse Island. Ensure the security of the territory and monitor everything in the territory at all times. He himself went to the carpentry workshop to complete the task first. The sooner the wheelbarrow was invented, the sooner the construction of the territory could be completed. The carpentry workshop was still busy. Carpenters and carpenter apprentices as well as carvers were constantly cutting wood, polishing corners and carving patterns. Seeing the arrival of the Lord, they put down their work and saluted Liszt. The steward of the carpentry workshop smiled like a henchman and complimented the arrival of Liszt. "My lord, the quality of the products of our carpentry workshop has been improving. The carpenters among the new serfs you brought have provided us with many mainland utensils. Now we are digesting these new utensils and striving to create new products to increase income." The word, income, originated from Liszt. He once told these stewards that generating income was the primary task of every workshop. Motioning for the carpenters to continue working, Liszt asked the steward to call in some of the most skilled carpenters, and then began to sketch out his own design. "Gentlemen carpenters, do you all know how to make carriages?" "Yes, my lord." "Very well, I have brought a new plan for making carriages today. This is a sketch. Look carefully, it is called a wheelbarrow. It can be pushed with only one wheel. It is similar to a two-wheeled scooter, but it is more convenient and suitable for walking on rugged roads." The carpenters surrounded the sketch and exclaimed, "What a beautiful wheelbarrow! Can one really stand on one wheel? With two poles supporting it, it should not fall to the ground. Yes, it looks as stable as a scooter and a little smaller. One wheel can even push a field ridge. It really is a wonderful design." When the carpenters finished sighing, Liszt continued, "The shape of the wheelbarrow can vary. Look at this sketch, the wheelbarrow has a bucket that can be filled with grain, gravel, sand and so on. It can even transport water if it is sealed. Look at this one, the wooden planks on both sides can be stacked with as many bags as you want." He had brought a lot of sketches. After the first introduction he moved on to another one. "Let's look at this one. A wheelbarrow is basically a few wooden sticks and a wheel. It can be so simple. Of course, it doesn't have to be a wheelbarrow. A wheelbarrow with two wheels is fine as well. For a wheelbarrow with a bucket like this, you can directly flip it over by holding onto the handlebars. All kinds of wheelbarrows and carts. They were all in Liszt's drawings. The carpenters greedily stared at each sketch. They knew that every kind of woodworking tool was a skill worth inheriting. The more skills they mastered, the more benefits they could obtain. Your next task is to master the production of wheelbarrows and carts as soon as possible. Produce them as soon as possible and deliver them to the territory for use. My lord, please rest assured that we will complete the wheelbarrows and carts as soon as possible." The steward vowed. He was also a carpenter and knew that it was not difficult to make these carts. "Remember to keep it a secret. I do not want to hear any news about the wheelbarrows and carts being leaked." It was impossible to keep it a secret forever. Liszt only hoped to keep it a secret for as long as possible. When the output of the carpentry workshop increased, he could take the opportunity to sell them to the outside world and make a profit. One does not know the cost of firewood unless one is in charge. Chapter 491. In order to get the fallen sky ship as soon as possible, List kept an eye on the carpenters in the carpentry workshop to make the wheelbarrow. With thorny ironwood and rubber glue, the carpenters only needed to make the appropriate parts and put them together to form a wheelbarrow. However, the precision was a problem. The first wheelbarrow was made in 2 days, but it was very ugly and not flexible enough when pushed. This attracted Isaiah's amazement. "My lord, is this a wheelbarrow? It's amazing. It's more flexible than a handcart and a person can push it around. With such a wheelbarrow, serfs don't need to spend much effort when transporting goods. It's too rough and not detailed enough. Carpenters, continue to work, I want to make a qualified wheelbarrow." List was not satisfied. There was no other way, the smoke mission had not been completed yet. This meant that the wheelbarrow was defective and not recognized. It could also be said that List did not recognize it in his heart. After all, the smoke mission had a lot to do with the reflection of his thoughts. Even in his view, the completion rate of the mission and the issuance of many missions were a portrayal of his heart. The smoke dragon's power of fate mixed with his own spiritual power to form the smoke mission. Whether it was like this or not was not important, the important thing was that the carpenters had to make a better wheelbarrow. With the experience of the first wheelbarrow, the second wheelbarrow only needed a few changes to improve the precision of the parts. So in less than a day, a brand new wheelbarrow was produced. When the carpenters pushed the wheelbarrow smoothly in the carpentry workshop, List summoned the smoke mission and showed a satisfied smile. Mission completed, reward, the fallen sky ship. After the mission was completed, he hurriedly told the carpentry workshop to produce wheelbarrows and left. Returning to the town's office, he arranged for the patrol team to increase the patrol, trying to find the fallen sky ship. In addition, he didn't need to do anything else. Because the new mission was the same as last year's festival mission. It's been another year of hard work. As a lord, I finally have the opportunity to relax and enjoy the upcoming festival, but I still have to think about the development of the territory next year, prepare for the Sky Knight's training, and plan for the breeding of the magic fire seed. Please wait for the end of the festival. Reward, unknown reward. Every time a new year or war ended, there would be unknown rewards, and they were all very valuable rewards. This made him want to spend the new year as soon as possible. Unfortunately, it was only December 26th, and there were still 4 days until the new year. The patrols of Flower Town and Black Horse Island did not find the fallen sky ship. It was actually discovered by a group of sailors involved in the development of the new port. Newport Town, located in the northwest corner of Black Horse Island, has not yet been built, but its attached Newport Pier has begun to explore the waters. Even if the seawater was bone-chilling in winter, for sailors who were used to the harsh cold, it was just a winter swim. When they were exploring the depth of the sea, they discovered a huge sunken ship at the bottom of the sea. So they quickly sent the news to the castle and to List's ears. A huge sunken ship was discovered in the waters of Newport? List's expression was calm, but his heart was extremely excited. This sunken ship was undoubtedly the sky ship that had fallen. The descendants of the Sun's Child have not been forgotten. The people of the Sun's Child sent the sky ship to welcome them home, but it sank. List quickly dispatched the flowers and prepared to sail to the Newport waters of Black Horse Island. At the same time he took out the floating bottle, used a little of old Phil's blood, opened the bottle cap, and poured out the note with the Sun language. The tower collapsed, the tree city burned, XX has died, the Sun's Child will rise with the flame, the children of the outside world, you are free. Comparing the Sun language on the note, List guessed in his heart, the Sun's Child clearly sent the sky ship. Why did he send out a floating bottle? Since there was a ship to pick up people, of course, there was no need to use a floating bottle to send a letter, unless they knew that the sky ship had sunk. But there were still many logical obstacles that could not be explained. List was not in a hurry to guess. Anyway, the sky ship was soaking in the waters of the new port and could be salvaged at any time. Then he could find secrets from the ship's relics. A new world was about to unfold in front of him. The excitement in his heart could be imagined. Before leaving, he found the siren Chi, who was reading a book in the Seascape Villa. Chi, I found a shipwreck in the waters of the new port of Black Horse Island and am preparing to salvage it. In order to prevent any relics from being missed, I hope you can follow me and fish up all the missing items. Chi simply nodded, okay. She would not refuse any of List's requests. It was already the morning of the 28th when they sailed overnight to the Newport waters. When they arrived, they found that the Thorns had been dispatched to salvage the shipwreck. Sir, this shipwreck is too big. It is like a castle falling into the sea. It is difficult for the Thorns to drag it up from the bottom of the sea, and our sailors cannot dive to the bottom of the sea and cut the shipwreck into pieces. Gort reported, I think we need to gather more ships and salvage it together. Then dispatch the flower, the pearl, and the mangrove to salvage the shipwreck together. List waved his hand and made a decision. Then he added, by the way, Advisor Gort, I recently received a batch of gold coins, about 5,000, which have been allocated for the construction of the new town. There are still 1,000 gold coins left. I hope you can take these 1,000 gold coins and exchange them for 3 more cargo ships to replenish the fleet of Black Horse Island. His gold coins came from the Levis couple. They were selling black pearls very well and had begun to make money, so they could pay off part of the payment before the new year. He even planned to order another batch of black pearls, but unfortunately, List did not have extra black pearls. With the gold coins he planned to buy ships. The cargo traffic between Black Horse Island and Flower Town would gradually become busy, and it would be difficult to satisfy the demand without a large number of ships. Moreover, he also hoped that he could nurture a batch of qualified crew members and build a sufficient number of ships to participate in the future expansion war. It was uncomfortable to always borrow other people's ships. At noon, several ships stopped cargo and came to the new port waters. After letting the sailors dive and tie the ropes, the 4 ships sailed together, towing the shipwreck that was half buried on the seabed. However, to List's dismay, the 4 ships still failed to drag the shipwreck out of the mud. At night, the shipwreck was still sinking on the seabed, and there was no sign of it coming up. Captain Costo shook his head and sighed, Sir, the shipwreck sank deep and the ship's towing power is not enough. We need more ships to participate in the salvage of the shipwreck. List thought about it. List made a decision. Forget it, we will salvage the shipwreck after the new year. Let it stay in the sea for a while longer. Anyway, I don't know how many years it will sink, so there is no hurry. Pay attention to confidentiality and don't disclose the news of the shipwreck here. Understood, sir. However, except for List, no one knew that a large white shell was searching for the fallen ship on the seabed. Chapter 492. Sometimes List himself feels that a cheese roll is too big. What he can give a chi and what he can get from a chi are simply incomparable. It can be said to be a small capital with great profits. Now, the fallen sky ship has been entrusted to a chi to salvage, and the good things can be sent directly to the Sea View Villa in Flower Town. Then he can return to Flower Town with peace of mind and prepare to attend the New Year's Eve dinner at Tulip Castle. Although it has been in theft, because the family is still maintained, all the Tulip family's bloodline must return to Tulip Castle to attend the dinner at New Year's Eve. Unless there is a special arrangement, such as last year they went to Longtaro Castle to spend the New Year's Eve. This year there will be 1 more person at Tulip Castle's New Year's Eve dinner. No, there will be 2 more people. Rolia Golden Wheatsway has been successfully pregnant, and List will have a younger generation. He is looking forward to the birth of this little baby. Perhaps witnessing the birth of a new life will make him more integrated into the Tulip family. On the 29th in Port Town he will host the year-end summary. On the 30th in Flower Town he will host another year-end summary. On the morning of January 1st, 153 of the Sapphire calendar, on the morning of New Year's Eve, List rode Loki, who was still evolving, and set off with his Blizzard Beast team to Tulip Castle. He also brought the corn sprite Mickey along because both the Count and Madame Penelope wanted to see this sprite. The birth of every sprite is a great honor for the Tulip family. Loki's speed is so fast that the retainers can't catch up with him on horseback, so he directly let the retainers lead the Blizzard Beast and walk slowly on the ground. He himself rode Loki and glided at low altitude. Counting the rest time, he arrived at Tulip Castle in just an hour. Silva, the deputy butler who was directing the servants to clear the snow on the road, was surprised to see List riding a big bird. Good morning, Master List. Silva greets you. I didn't expect you to come to Tulip Castle so early. You must have gotten up early. No, I'm just faster on a mount. Ha! Silva didn't understand. List didn't say that he didn't like Silva, the deputy butler. In his memory the old butler, Levis, treated the 4 children very well, but Silva favored Levis more. Ask someone to help me feed Loki. Remember, Loki likes to eat wheat grains, preferably barley grains. Don't eat too much at one time, 3 pounds will do. But every 2 hours he needs to be fed again. His body is growing now. Also give it some fruits, juicy fruits. Yes, young Master List. Silva replied respectfully, I'll go inform Master, Madam, young Master, and young Miss of your arrival. Silva, where's Grandpa Lewis? He used to come out and greet me. Steward Lewis is currently recuperating from his illness. The Lord has allowed him to retire. Currently, I am the steward of Tulip Castle. Young Master List, if you have any requests, just let me know. Louis falls ill. Silva returns to work. List frowned and decided to visit Louis. He liked that Louis used the word home every time he came to Tulip Castle. It made him feel like he wasn't a guest but the owner of Tulip Castle. It made him feel more at home. Now that Silva didn't use the word home, it meant that in his eyes List was just a guest. Of course, from the perspective of enfeoffment, List was indeed a guest of Tulip Castle and no longer lived in Tulip Castle. It was just that he felt a little uncomfortable. The old butler Louis had moved out of Tulip Castle after his retirement and lived in a wooden manor house next to the castle. He could also help take care of the manor. Seeing List walking in the snow, Louis, who was wrapped in a thick cotton coat, suddenly lit up his pale face. I know that the most glorious son of the Lord will definitely come to the New Year's banquet today. It's a pity that I'm sick and can't greet you in person. I've come to see you. I hope you'll get better soon. List smiled warmly. Louis was living a good life. There was charcoal burning in the manor fireplace and the house was very warm. There were also 2 servants cleaning the place. For an old butler who had contributed his whole life to the family, the Count obviously wouldn't let his old age end in a miserable state. They chatted for a while. It was heartwarming to hear Louis talk about his predecessor's childhood. But soon Levis came to find him. List, I was wondering where you were. So you were at Grandpa Louis's place. I was looking for you. Young Master Levis, young Master List, you can go ahead. Grandpa Louis, take care of yourself. If you need anything, just tell me. List stood up. Levis said directly, don't worry List, I'll take care of Grandpa Louis. Let's go have a drink and talk about making money. With the glory of the knight who cares for you, I've made a lot of money this year, hee hee. Black tulip, fresh flower wine, black pearls. Plus some other trades. As a channel dealer, Levis eats no less than List, and now his wallet is getting fatter and fatter. Therefore he is getting closer to List not only because he can make money but also because of List's talent. The 17-year-old Sky Knight, his future strength will definitely surpass the Count. How can he not be close to such a younger brother? Kinship was the bond between people, but interests were the eternal and unchanging topic of communication. Do you want to talk about business, brother? Just leave it to Mr. Frank and Advisor Gort. I'm not interested in these things. You are now a Sky Knight. There is really no need to worry about this small business. Levis was speechless and quickly felt that he and List were no longer on the same level. List often pulled him to talk about business, but now he was dismissive of business. Sure enough, different strengths bring different horizons. He also immediately changed the subject. What about your corn sprite, did you bring it? Grandma has been talking about it several times. It's also thanks to your knight's glory that Grandma is going to give us this year as a gift, or a potted plant. I received several potted plants from her, but I didn't see a sprite worm. Everyone complained about Madame Penelope's potted plants. Only List was happy. He had already received a black nightshade worm and a fig worm from Madame Penelope. The gifts were of great value. By the way, Levis added, Grandpa, Uncle, and Cousin have all sent you gifts to congratulate you on your promotion to a Sky Knight. They are in the castle. Do you want to go and see them now? List immediately looked forward to it. A gift to congratulate me, then let's go and see. Chapter 493. 3 boxes, 3 gifts. List, filled with anticipation, opened the first box. This box was a congratulatory gift from Meopal and Angela. The box looked very big, but after opening it, it was stuffed with wood shavings. In the middle of the wood shavings was an even smaller box. After opening the small box, the gift inside was immediately revealed before his eyes. It's a sapphire pendant. Levis, who was standing on the side, immediately recognized the gift. It should be a sapphire magic equipment stimulated by a magic array to increase strength. The sapphire produced by the sapphire dragon had the mysterious power of increasing strength, greatly increasing the strength of the user. At the same time, the gem also had a general effect of increasing the casting effect of magic. According to different magic arrays, different effects of the gem could be stimulated. Since it was a gift for List, it naturally would not stimulate the magic amplification, but rather the strength amplification. Sure enough, being the son-in-law of a Grand Duke is different. With a sapphire dragon at home, the gifts are sapphire magic equipment. List was very satisfied with the gift. The value of the sapphire equipment was very high, at least 1,000 or 2,000 gold coins. This was also the case when his grandfather, Marquis Merlin, gave him the red blood sword. After saying that, He hung the sapphire pendant around his neck, stimulated the sapphire pendant with his chi, and quickly formed a connection between auras. Thereupon, he felt that under the stimulation of the sapphire pendant, his body was stimulated by abundant strength out of thin air. It was as if he could kill a World of Warcraft with one punch. After hanging it up, he did not intend to take it off. He immediately opened the second box, which was a congratulatory gift from Mr. and Mrs. Masiro. After opening it, he took out a cloak with fine workmanship. It had a red face, a black background, and golden edges. It looked very gorgeous. This was not an ordinary cloak, but a piece of magical equipment. According to the letter inside, it was carefully woven from the fur of a low-level World of Warcraft woolly beast. This cloak alone used the fur of 10 woolly beasts, and the attacks of the Earth Knight could not tear it apart. Its value was not low, but it was not high either. It was worth about 400 or 500 gold coins. List was quite satisfied. After all, it was just a congratulatory gift between relatives. A gift of 400 to 500 gold coins was already very expensive. Finally, there was the gift from his grandfather, Marquis Merlin. Like the gift from Meopel and his wife, it was also a box within a box. When the small box was finally opened, there was only a feather inside. He did not have time to see what feather it was. Levis exclaimed, "Oh my God, List, Grandpa treats you so well." This was a phoenix feather. The feathers of the legendary Central Asian dragon, the phoenix. Phoenix feather? List was also surprised. He had heard of the phoenix before. It was said that it was born from flames and possessed the bloodline of dragons. It was a super dragon species in World of Warcraft. However, the phoenix was only a legendary creature. There was no concrete evidence to prove that it truly existed in this world. Some night novels depicted phoenixes, but most of them depicted the feathers of phoenixes. No one had been able to find the phoenix. Even in the night novels, it had never appeared. However, its feathers appeared frequently in the night novels and were generally described as the essence of flames. For a fire-attributed knight to obtain a phoenix feather, it could be said to be like adding wings to a tiger. It could substantially increase the cultivation speed of fire-attributed chi. For a knight of other attributes, the phoenix feather was of little value. For a fire-attributed knight, however, it was a treasure worth thousands upon thousands of gold coins. No one had described the price of the phoenix feather, but it was certainly calculated in dragon coins. Just this phoenix feather alone could be sold for several dragon coins, which was several tens of thousands of gold coins. Its value was much higher than that of the little elf soldier. It was almost comparable to a dragon bone weapon forged from dragon bones. Is it really a phoenix feather? List held the feather in his hand, feeling the surging fire-attributed magic power. He unconsciously swallowed his saliva. The gift from my grandfather is really too valuable. I shouldn't have accepted such a valuable gift, but I can't bear to give it back. Of course you have to keep it. This is a phoenix feather. You happen to be a fire-attributed knight. You can't miss it, and it's a gift from my grandfather. Why can't you accept it? Levis cried. He had already lost his composure. This gift was too valuable. That's right. It's a gift from my grandfather. I must accept it, List said solemnly. At the same time, his mind was exceptionally clear. His grandfather's gift was not only a congratulatory gift, but also a kind of entrustment. He hoped that he could help the Taro family. Marquis Merlin had expressed this when he spent the New Year's festival in Long Taro Castle. After all, the Taro family was too small. It didn't matter if there was such a gift. With the blood of the Taro family, he would definitely help the Taro family when he could. Now that Marquis Merlin had sent such a valuable gift, coupled with the fact that he had been good to him since he was young, List could not escape this responsibility. Phew. He looked at the phoenix feather in his hand, still feeling a little incredulous. The phoenix feather of the draconic phoenix, had truly appeared in front of him. Before this, whether the draconic dragon existed was still limited to legends. No one could prove it. Now it seemed that there was no need to prove anything. The phoenix feather's surging fire attribute magic was enough to prove that it was not much weaker than the dragon bone. But when List carefully looked at the phoenix feather, he suddenly found that this feather did not seem like a real feather. Instead, it was like some kind of fiery red gemstone in the shape of a feather. The texture was also very hard to the touch. It was as prickly as iron wire and difficult to change shape. Is this a feather or not? He could not help but ask, Levis, do you think the phoenix feather is really a phoenix feather? It doesn't seem to be a real feather. Let me see. Levis carefully took the phoenix feather and carefully observed it. I can't say for sure. It really doesn't look like a real feather. However, we have never seen a phoenix and we don't know what a draconic dragon looks like. Perhaps this is what a phoenix feather should look like. In any case, as long as it works for you, it's a real phoenix feather. This was indeed the case. Whether it had fallen from a phoenix or was some kind of gemstone formed in nature, as long as the effect was still the same as the legend, then it was a real phoenix feather. The surging fire attribute magic was enough to prove that it was a real phoenix feather. He put it into his arms. It was like putting a stove in his arms, full of warmth. After a moment, in the living room on the second floor, the Tulip family all sat together, looking at the phoenix feather on the table. The Count used a magnifying glass and lowered his head to carefully observe the lines of the phoenix feather. The magnifying glass was a small invention that came with the telescope invented by Liszt. I can't judge whether it is really the remains of a creature. At least compared to the dragon bone, there are more signs of magic power. It is likely to be the product of magic power condensation, like the gemstones produced by dragons. The Count raised his head and said the results of his analysis. Chapter 494. Dragon, a wyvern. Super dragon species in World of Warcraft, inferior dragon. Other high-level, intermediate and low-level dragons in World of Warcraft, dragon. Together with a dragon species, it formed the genealogy of dragons and dragon-type creatures. Wyverns were the pinnacle of power in this world, standing at the top of the food chain. Very few creatures could threaten their existence. Wyverns were legendary creatures. There were many descriptions of them, but no one had ever seen them in person. Draconic beasts were also rare, but they still existed. List's chocobo Loki was a low-level draconic beast. Loki's bloodline evolution had not yet been completed, and it might eventually become a mid-level dragon. Dragon-type beasts generally existed in groups, such as the blue blood horses raised by Sapphire Grand Duke, the black blood horses raised by List, and the dragon milk cows raised by him. In short, the gem-like phoenix feather could not prove the existence of the phoenix. After showing it to his family, he immediately put the phoenix feather back into the gem space. This was a priceless treasure for him, and he could not be too careful. So much so that he did not intend to study the phoenix feather in Tulip Castle. After the New Year's festival, he would return to his territory and then slowly study it. This year's New Year's festival was quite lively. The family gave each other gifts, which were relatively ordinary food, clothes and the like, with no valuables. Madame Penelope still gave him a potted plant that she had carefully taken care of. Unfortunately, List walked around her balcony and did not find a potted plant that bred sprite worms. Those 2 sprite worms could be said to be something that could only be encountered and not sought. I read the List's Earth Codex created by you. Many of the cultivation experiences in it were clear and eye-catching, and many of the methods inspired me. The Count was in the study chatting face-to-face with List. It was unknown when, but List gradually stepped into the study more often. Of course, a lot of the time was spent awkwardly chatting, and tonight was no different. After awkwardly chatting about some trivial matters in life, the two simply exchanged their cultivation experiences. List replied, "I did not expect to be able to inspire you. I've been thinking about how you managed to become a Sky Knight in such a short time. This goes against my understanding of cultivation. But through this letter, as well as your communication with List and Lytton, I finally understood the reason." "Oh, Father, what kind of reason do you understand?" "You have a deep understanding of cultivation. This understanding is even deeper than a sword saint like me. Most of the time, we think that cultivation talent is reflected in one's bloodline, but that's not the case. A person's vision and knowledge can also determine their talent." Then the Count began to summarize his findings. He said a lot blah 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 blah. In the final analysis, List was smart and rarely took detours in his practice. It was difficult for the Count to find an excuse for him. Of course, List would not be ungrateful, so he nodded and said, "Yes, Father. My bloodline is the same as yours and my brother's. My talent is not much better. However, I have been thinking more about cultivation, and this thinking has helped me open the door to a new world of cultivation. So I think that we, father and son, need to communicate more in the future. I have a lot of experience in Sky Knight cultivation, and you have a keen understanding of cultivation. If we communicate more, it will be a great improvement for both of us. Maybe in a few years I will be able to become a perfect Sky Knight. I also hope to help you achieve it as soon as possible. So, have you summed up any clues in your recent practice as a Sky Knight?" the Count asked. List replied, "At present I'm still adjusting my body's new degree of adaptation to the potion, and at the same time, I'm also exploring the tricks of high-level chi cultivation. If there's anything you don't understand, just ask me. I will. Look at the Sword Saint's Handbook that your grandfather gave you. I often borrow this handbook from Levis to read. There is indeed a lot of experience that can be used as a reference. In fact, I have already memorized the Sword Saint's Handbook. The Count was inexplicably embarrassed. Well, Liszt continued to show off, I like to read and I have a good memory. In fact, I have also memorized the Red Sun Rising Fire secret book. I think that instead of storing commonly used knowledge in books, it is better to store it directly in your mind and extract it at any time you need it. Well, I don't like magicians. They are always destroying, but I admire their enthusiasm for studying the truth. I also think that they use magic books to spread knowledge, which is a very good way. If you want to understand something, the best way is to record and study it. Well, I do the same. I study the interaction between potions and chi, the interaction between potions and the body, the study of reasonable cultivation methods, and even new chi secret books. I think that if the predecessors can create chi secret books, it is not impossible for me to create them. You are still planning to create chi secret books? The Count exclaimed. Father, this is not difficult to understand. Liszt calmly took a sip of milk. If potions can sum up a way suitable for an individual's physique, why can't chi secret books sum up a move suitable for an individual's physique? Everyone's fighting style is different, and the body is also different. The chi secret books of the predecessors may not be completely suitable for me. The Count sat in his seat, holding a glass of red wine and constantly sipping it. Liszt was still talking endlessly. He was now a Sky Knight, and it was rare for him to communicate with the Count, who was also a Sky Knight. Naturally, he wanted to enjoy himself. In the Earth Knight stage, I was eager to break through to Sky Knight, so I didn't have the time to create chi secret books. Now that I have become a Sky Knight, I should think carefully and create a chi secret book that suits me. This was the truth. In the past, he was weak and lacked a sense of security, so he desperately took potions to cultivate. Now that he had become a Sky Knight, he even had a shadow of the dragon he would ride in the future. Naturally, he no longer had to worry and could be more patient in his cultivation. He was ready to continue his long speech. The Count suddenly interrupted. It's already late. Liszt, it's time to go back and rest. Don't forget that today is the New Year's Day. Relax properly and don't always think about cultivation. I agree with your idea and hope that you can have a greater breakthrough. I am proud of you, my son. Despite being somewhat disappointed, Liszt still got up and said goodbye. The Count was left sitting alone in his study, unhappy. He poured a glass of red wine and fiercely poured it into his stomach. Returning to his room to rest, Liszt couldn't sleep. First, he was waiting for the unknown reward of the smoke mission to be issued after 12 o'clock. Second, the phoenix feather had always been tempting him, making him impatient to take it out and play with it. The fiery red feather was about the distance between the middle finger and the wrist. The whole feather was slightly curled and had a transparent luster. This was a proper feather. The large feathers covering the body of a bird, as well as the flight feathers and tail feathers, were all classified as proper feathers. The structure of a proper feather included a feather handle, a feather shaft, a feather branch, and a feather. This phoenix feather had these structures. However, its feather branch was not pliable and had many small crystal protrusions. The feather was also very thick and also had a crystal-like structure. It doesn't look like a real feather no matter how I look at it. It looks like some kind of fossil feather. Is it growing on a phoenix? Liszt began to recall the knowledge he had read about the phoenix. The draconic phoenix was not the same as the phoenix in China's legend. It was more similar to the immortal bird in Western legend. It was essentially a fire attribute World of Warcraft. Chapter 495. This chapter is My Horse Feeds the Sheep. The Legend of This World. The phoenix had a lifespan of 500 years. When it was about to die, it would pick up many branches and then burn itself to ashes. In the ashes, a new phoenix would be born and the cycle would repeat. There was also a legend that after the phoenix died, its bones would give birth to worms. The worms would constantly eat each other and eventually grow into a new phoenix. Of course, there was also a legend that phoenixes lived in volcanic craters. They were new creatures born after the death of a fire dragon. 500 years for a reincarnation. This sounds a bit similar to the legend of the Dragon Valley that Virginia told me. It is said that the Dragon Valley is the place where dragons reincarnate. The old dragons will return to the Dragon Valley and arrange the secret of their own reincarnation. It seems that these legends are all connected. 4 legendary creatures. Humans could probably only think of reincarnation, immortality, and other magical manifestations. He put the phoenix feather on the table, then asked a servant to bring a pen and paper, and began to write a letter. The letter was addressed to Marquis Merlin, expressing his gratitude and hinting that he would take care of the Taro family. At the same time, he also asked Marquis Merlin for more information about the phoenix feather. Where did he get it from? Was there a real phoenix or something like that? After writing the letter, he lit a candle, scooped out a bit of rosin and poured it on the envelope. He then took out a long square stamp engraved with the name Lys, and pressed it on the rosin, leaving a special mark. He gave it to the servants of Tulip Castle and asked them to help him send the letter. Soon after, he began to concentrate on studying the phoenix feather, holding it in his hand and playing with it. It had a warm texture. Because this phoenix feather was too precious, he was always careful, studying it bit by bit. He forgot the time while studying, and in the blink of an eye, it was almost 12 o'clock. After roughly figuring out the external nature of the phoenix feather, he decided to infuse it with qi, stimulate it, and try to use it to speed up his qi cultivation. When the qi touched the phoenix feather, Liszt could feel the temperature in the room instantly rise by 10 degrees. The phoenix feather also immediately seemed to burn. It was not a real flame, but a surging fire magic released in a flame-like flow. Then, through the qi circulation, it entered Liszt's meridians, helping it expand the impetus of the qi. The effect is similar to taking drugs. Liszt's eyes lit up as he carefully manipulated this new mana and transformed it into his own qi. There was a clear boundary between the new Do qi and the dragon Do qi in his body, but as the Do qi continued to circulate, the boundary gradually blurred and tried to fuse together. His Do qi was originally formed from fusion. The newly born Do qi would definitely become stronger. However, just as this wave of Do qi, which had yet to completely merge, flowed through his meridians towards the position of his heart, something unexpected happened. The mana fire seed in his heart was stimulated by this new energy and suddenly went berserk. It released a huge suction force, crazily devouring the qi in Liszt's body. In the blink of an eye, the Do qi in his body became empty, and his body became limp and powerless. Only his brain remained clear-headed, and he was exceptionally frightened. What's going on? The phoenix feather's magical power clashed with the mana fire seed? 2 tigers cannot share one mountain? Was that why the magic fire seed went berserk? Liszt's fear was mixed with impatience. He felt as if he was possessed by the devil, and his body's condition was very bad. Do qi was the source of a knight's power. Once it disappeared, a knight would definitely become an ordinary person. However, he had no way to resist. The mana fire seed in his heart was not restrained at all. Using my body to raise a dragon is really a mistake. He began to regret. He wished he could dig out his heart, find the mana fire seed, and then crush it. However, a change occurred very quickly. After absorbing all the qi in his body, the mana fire seed did not stop but continued to devour. There was no qi in his body, so it moved towards the phoenix feather in Liszt's hand. This strong suction force was transmitted through his meridians into his hands, and actually began to devour the phoenix feather's magical flame. These flames seemed to want to resist. However, they were unable to resist, and were sucked into the meridians of Liszt's hand. A burning pain spread through his hands, and continued to attack his whole body through his meridians until it reached his heart. He felt as if his whole heart had begun to twitch. The piercing pain almost made him numb. He wanted to faint, but the continuous improvement of his physical fitness made him unable to faint. He could only feel the pain clearly. What the hell is going on? What happened? Why did the mana fire seed rebel? Did the phoenix feather stimulate the magical fire seed? He could only think to divert the pain. He wanted to use the magic eye, but there was no qi to circulate, so he could only look at his hands with his naked eyes. The flames of the burning phoenix feather constantly drilled into the skin of his palm. As the mana fire seed continued to absorb, the flames became smaller and smaller, and the luster of the phoenix feather became dimmer and dimmer. He didn't know how much time had passed. For him, it was as long as a century. Finally, the phoenix feather in his hand was completely extinguished, without the slightest luster. Then it slowly shattered into powder and disappeared between his fingers. Before it fell to the ground, it had completely turned into flying ash. My priceless phoenix feather is gone just like that? Liszt wanted to cry but had no tears. He hadn't even started cultivating, and the phoenix feather, worth a few dragon coins, had completely disappeared without a trace. not waiting for him to cry. A strange feeling quickly emerged, spreading from his heart. The devouring power of the mana fire seed had disappeared. In fact, he couldn't even feel the mana fire seed. Only the strange feeling in his heart, which was connected to his brain, produced a certain feeling. It was as if something had come to life. Roar! A tender cry sounded in his mind. Not only did it put an end to all the pain in his body, but it also gave him a telepathic feeling similar to that of a contract sprite worm. It was as if the emotions of a tender, newborn and weak life had occupied a corner of his mind. List was a little confused. At the same time, the warmth in his heart began to move rapidly, quickly moving along his meridians to his palm. He lowered his head, and his eyes suddenly saw a flame igniting in the hollow of his palm. There was no burning sensation, no stinging pain from the flame, only a faint warmth. The flame quickly twisted and formed a small flying creature. It had bat-like wings, a slender body, 2 thick hind legs and 2 thin and short front legs. It also had a tail that kept swinging and a slightly cute horned head. It was clearly the form of a small mana fire dragon. Roar! The small mana fire dragon opened its mouth and issued a subtle but real roar. All of a sudden, the confused List was pulled back from his daze and became completely sober. Small mana fire dragon? Chapter 496. This chapter is steamed good peas. Thank you for updating. The young fire dragon in the palm of his hand is completely composed of compressed flames. Its eyes, ears, mouth, nose, legs, claws and wings are all clearly visible. Even the scales on its body can be clearly seen. The eyes condensed by the flames are as bright as a gem, full of life. There is no doubt that this is a real dragon. Fire dragon. The fire dragon, which List had personally bred, had to swallow the entire phoenix feather to hatch from the state of a magic fire seed. Roar! Seeing List staring at it, the young fire dragon seemed a little dissatisfied and opened its mouth to cry. Its voice is very small, it feels like a roar, but in fact, it is similar to the cry of a little puppy. But List can vaguely feel its emotions. Very vague emotions, much weaker than the telepathic connection after the contract with the elves. But he can barely distinguish the meaning of the emotion. Little Charmander, what form are you in? List asked in a low voice. He didn't expect it to answer, so it was more of a question to itself. He was very curious about the difference between this little fire dragon and a real adult dragon. In terms of composition, an adult dragon had a body of flesh and blood, with bones and muscles, while the little fire dragon was condensed from flames, without a body of flesh and blood. He did not feel the magic of the fire dragon or the power of the dragon from the little fire dragon. It seems to be just a flame composed of its own fighting spirit, but there is a clear boundary between the flame and fighting spirit. This boundary determines that it is an independent individual. An individual with a soul and a mind. Roar! The little fire dragon did not understand what List is asking. It made an unknown sound, then flapped its wings and made a flying action. However, it can't leave List's palm. It seems that its body and List's fighting spirit are still connected. During this time, List's body has barely generated some fighting spirit. He tried to run his fighting spirit and found that he can run it again and even affect the little fire dragon. As soon as he absorbed it, the little fire dragon quickly turned into a flame and was absorbed into his meridians. Then it felt a faint anger in its mind. Charmander was very unhappy that it had been sucked into the meridian. So List released it again. The flames condensed and Charmander reappeared. Roar! It seemed to be scolding List. I feel like this guy is too weak. He doesn't have the slightest bit of majesty of a dragon. Is there something wrong? As he thought about it, he suddenly stretched out his other hand. His thumb pressed down on his index finger, and he gave Charmander a finger-flicking spirit art. Patter. It felt real to the touch. His fingers felt like they were flicking on a soft piece of meat. Charmander's head bounced up, and then its entire body tilted and fell on his palm. Charmander waved its limbs and struggled to get up. It opened its mouth and screamed, "Roar!" Then a small flame came out of its mouth and sprayed at List's hand, which was still holding a finger snap. However, when the flame touched List's finger, it did not produce any burning effect. He didn't feel anything. Discovering this, Charmander was very disappointed, and even its roar sound was a little weaker. So List took out a thick piece of bast paper and extended it in front of Charmander. Come on, spit out a flame. He gave orders to Charmander in the same way he gave orders to the elves, using a vague emotional connection. Charmander tilted his head and froze for a while. Then he suddenly opened his mouth and spat out flames. The flames instantly pierced through the thick bast paper and turned half of it into flying ash. There was no sign of burning, and the process of paper to ash was completed directly. The temperature in the room rose a few degrees again. The power of the flame is good, but it is a little small, and there is no eternal mark engraving nature. This is not the real magic of the fire dragon. Charmander is not a real young dragon. Its current state is very wonderful. It seems to be between the magic fire seed and the real fire dragon. List grabbed with his left hand and held the little fire dragon in the palm of his hand, enjoying the soft meatball. Looking at the mighty little fire dragon, it couldn't resist his claws at all, and could only anxiously roar. List did not stop at all. He still remembered the severe pain he felt when the magic fire seed swallowed the phoenix feather. Even if it was a dragon, bullying an honest man like this was intolerable. Without waiting for Charmander to respond, he ran his chi again and put the little fire dragon directly into his chi meridian. Charmander was very angry in the meridian and was determined to get out, but it couldn't resist List's chi. With the chi running, it was stuffed all the way into the meridian of the heart. This meridian was very wide, and it was also the place where the magic fire seed chose to live. It was very suitable to imprison Charmander. Roar! In his mind, he could hear the roar of the little fire dragon, like a puppy that had been stepped on. His face had recovered and he was a little hungry, but his mood was very tangled. This is definitely not the fire dragon I want. This kind of thing is not worthy of being called a dragon. It is not like the majestic dragon under the Dragon Knight. During the magic fire seed period, List could not control it, but now he could control it at will. Therefore, there was a huge contrast with his expectations for a dragon, and he couldn't accept it for a while. He took out the dragon milk from the gem space and drank it. Then he took out the cooked World of Warcraft meat and wolfed it down. Finally, he appeased the hunger caused by the depletion of his chi. With the constant wriggling and absorption of the body's stomach, the nutrition was supplemented into the cells, and then the chi was produced to fill the meridian. The chi he had lost was quickly restored by a small half. At this time, he tried to use the original method of training with the magic fire seed to transfer the combat chi to Charmander. He found that although Charmander was very angry, it obediently absorbed the combat chi, then expelled the magic impurities and mixed it with his combat chi. It was still producing dragon combat chi. And the speed was faster and the efficiency was improved several times. But the consumption also increased more than 10 times, and the little chi that was replenished quickly fell into a state of depletion. The dragon chi produced was less than 1/10. I originally had to feed 2 mouths. Now I have to feed several mouths. The little fire dragon's appetite is too big. How can I feed it? He took out the dragon milk and World of Warcraft meat again and continued to eat to supplement nutrition. He also took out a magic potion. After taking the potion, he found that the increased chi still could not fill the little fire dragon's huge appetite. The little fire dragon that could swallow the chi finally calmed down and stayed in the heart position, enjoying the constant flow of chi. But soon its chi supply was cut off. List pulled a long face and was upset. I can't feed it like this, no amount of chi can satisfy its appetite. He himself had to continue to train. Without chi, how could he train? For the first time, he didn't look forward to raising a dragon. He was really frightened by the dragon's appetite. He didn't know if this was a super small mini dragon. At this time, he looked up and suddenly noticed that the clock on the wall had pointed to 12:30. The New Year's Day had passed. Right, smoke mission. Chapter 497. The little fire dragon in the form of a fire seed is obviously not a real young dragon. It shows that the expected fire dragon has not really been born yet, and there is still a long way to go before it becomes a dragon knight. However, the little fire dragon in the form of a fire seed has scared List half to death. Now it takes so many resources to raise it. If it is really bred and becomes a real little fire dragon, wouldn't it be bankrupt? How do other dragon knight ride dragons? Could it be that the dragon knight can suppress the destiny of a country? It doesn't mean that the strength of a dragon is enough to shelter a country alone, but that the resources of a country can be gathered to feed it? Thinking about it this way, it seems that this is really the case. Basically, dragons are controlled by various countries on the continent, and there are no private dragons. The most important thing is that the dragons of all countries seem to be gem dragons and metal dragons. There are only 1 or 2 dragons. I heard that they are elemental dragons. He was in a trance and even more sad. The fire dragon is an elemental dragon, and most elemental dragons are evil dragons. They don't produce and can't contribute to me. Isn't it more expensive to feed it? Gem dragons can produce gems, and the sale of gems is definitely a huge profit. Metal dragons can produce metal, and metal is a resource that countries compete for. What can the fire dragon do? Produce volcanoes? Or burn boilers? However, as soon as this idea came up, List had an idea. It seems that it can really burn boilers? The current fire dragon brick factory and public bathrooms are driven by the fire dragon magic. If my little fire dragon grows up, will it be able to provide more fire dragon magic? Fire dragon magic is an efficient energy source, clean and pollution-free. Once used reasonably, it may be able to replace coal, oil, and natural gas, and launch a new energy revolution. Thinking about it this way, the fire dragon is still very useful. Besides, the elemental dragon is more powerful. Once I ride the fire dragon, can't I beat the sapphire dragon? Or even seize the entire Grand Duchy of Sapphire and even the sapphire dragon? List thought about it fiercely. Only then did he slowly calm his emotions. In any case, the fire dragon has been bred in his body, and he can realize his dream at any time and become a dragon knight. If he didn't have enough resources, he would work hard to earn money by farming. If he didn't have enough strength, he would continue to preserve his strength. Countless perfection-level Sky Knights had prepared all their resources, but they could not find the dragon, so they could only die in frustration. Compared to them, he had already completed the most important step. All that was left was some preparatory work. With smoke missions and many industries, it was only a matter of time before they developed. Little Charmander, I will definitely raise you up. List narrowed his eyes and had another idea. Also, if there are no other dragons, I want to sign a contract with you and share half of your lifespan with me so that I can become the Lord of the Dragon Domain. It would take Charmander more than 100 years to grow up. List didn't have that long of a lifespan to wait. Becoming the Dragon Lord was a necessary step, unless the little fire dragon suddenly grew up. Of course. Right now, everything was still too hasty. First, he had to think of a way to breed Charmander. He didn't want it to take decades to breed. List focused his attention and called out the smoke mission again to check the new mission. It takes a lot of resources to breed the little fire dragon in the form of a fire seed into a real fire dragon, but don't forget the property left by the fire dragon. That is the real nourishment for the little fire dragon. Please feed the little fire dragon in the form of a fire seed. Reward: amber containing magic power. The content of the mission quickly inspired him. The property left by the fire dragon? This must be the fire dragon magic in the volcanic glass. It must be like this. These fire dragon magic will help the development of the mini fire dragon. After a long time, I still have to squeeze out my fire dragon magic. It was not easy to collect fire dragon magic. Last time, in order to stimulate the dragon bone magic array and breed the magic fire seed, most of the fire dragon magic mined on Black Horse Island had been consumed. Now, these fire dragon magic would have to be used to feed the mini fire dragon. Maybe there wouldn't be any left. The fire dragon jar that contained the fire dragon magic was in his gem space. He did not choose to start feeding it now. After all, this was Tulip Castle. If the fire dragon magic leaked, it would be very troublesome. He also didn't pay attention to the reward of the smoke mission, which was the magic amber. He calmed down and began to sleep. Early the next morning, List left Tulip Castle. Returning to his territory, he couldn't wait to take out the fire dragon jar, extract a little fire dragon magic and try to absorb it. In fact, it was not troublesome at all. When he released the mini fire dragon, the little guy immediately smelled the smell of the fire dragon magic. It kept shouting, "Oh roar," releasing a very strong desire. List did not give it the fire dragon magic, but tried to tame it like he tamed the blizzard beast. This age of the little fire dragon was probably the most suitable age for education. It would not be so easy to train it when it grew up. He didn't know how to ride a dragon, so he could only explore it himself. Do a somersault and I will give you the fire dragon magic. Roar. Do a somersault and I will give you the fire dragon magic. Roar. Do a somersault and I will give you the fire dragon magic. Roar. After several repetitions, the mini fire dragon reluctantly somersaulted and got a little fire dragon magic from List. He saw it open its mouth, and the fire dragon magic was sucked up in one gulp, leaving nothing behind. Then, a little impure magic was released from its body and mixed into List's do-chi. He felt that the quality of his do-chi has been slightly improved. This is probably the process of dragon do-chi advancement. Flap your wings and I will give you the fire dragon magic. Oh roar. Lift your hind legs and I will give you the fire dragon magic. Oh roar. Stick up your butt and I will give you the fire dragon magic. Oh roar. Sing a song and I will give you the fire dragon magic. Oh roar. Sing fire dragon magic. Oh roar. Sing magic. Oh roar. In the end, the mini fire dragon was so anxious that it still did not choose to sing. List had to give up. It seems that you really can't sing, so lick my finger and I will give you the fire dragon magic. The mini fire dragon had to stick out its tongue and lick List's finger, and then get a lot of fire dragon magic. For the whole morning, List did nothing. He had fun feeding the mini fire dragon and building a relationship with the mini fire dragon through training. He felt that the mini fire dragon had the pride of a dragon. Even though it was born in List's body, it still disdained List. But for the sake of the fire dragon magic, it had to lower its proud head. Life will always smooth its edges and corners. Gradually, all the fire dragon magic in a fire dragonkin was fed to the mini fire dragon, and it finally let out a comfortable burp, retracted into List's Do-Chi meridian, ran to the heart position and slept. It was full. The smoke mission was also completed. Chapter 498. The amber containing magic power was quickly delivered to List's hands without him having to worry about it. Sir, this is a strange stone dug out from the sand and stones by the serfs responsible for expanding the flower port's pier square. Isaiah personally sent a transparent yellow stone to the castle. It is as transparent as a gem and there is a sprite worm inside. Sprite worm? List quickly took the palm-sized flat stone, which was yellow in color and very transparent. The most wonderful thing was that it was wrapped in a fat sprite worm. The sprite worm curled up into a donut shape and looked lifelike. There were some impurities such as leaves around it. The overall shape indicated that it was amber, the amber rewarded by the smoke mission. Is this amber containing magic power? List quickly released magic eyes to observe the amber. Suddenly he found a faint magic power radiating with chaotic colors. Moreover, it was unexpectedly emitted from the sprite worm. The sprite worm wrapped in amber had yellow and black stripes on its body. List didn't know if it was its original appearance or if it had changed color in the amber. This surprised him. A sprite worm that has turned into amber can also have magic power? As far as he knew, amber was a drop of pine resin buried underground for thousands of years. Under the action of pressure and heat, it petrified and formed a gem-like stone. When the pine resin dripped down, it just happened to wrap the small sprite on the trunk, turning it into a magnificent fossil. However, amber on Earth was generally formed 40 to 60 million years ago. After all, it took a long time to fossilize pine resin. List didn't know how long it would take for amber to form in this world. But it was definitely not something that could be done in a short period of time. Otherwise it would just be rosin, not amber. List played with the amber for a moment and said to Isaiah, "Apart from this stone, are there any other stones found at the scene?" "None at the moment." "Keep looking. It is best to turn over the sand and stones in that area to see if there are other similar stones." Isaiah asked, "Sir, what is this stone? I have never seen it." "Amber is a stone formed from rosin after tens of millions of years. Do you see this sprite worm? I suspect that it is a sprite worm from tens of millions of years ago." Tens of millions of years ago? Isaiah was speechless. The history of humans in this world was not even clear for a few hundred years. The few early records were all attributed to the Moon Empire, so it was hard to explain. It was unimaginable tens of millions of years ago. Even List was confused. Were the humans here evolved? If they were evolved, then how did elves and dragons evolve? There was also the siren. According to Achi, she was born in a shell. There seemed to be no relevant evolutionary chain between a shell and a siren in human form. Therefore, no one knew what the world was like tens of millions of years ago. If you let the serfs look for more of this amber, they may find that the amber contains more things from tens of millions of years ago. The pine resin drips down and wraps around the things from that time. Then it can continue to be preserved just like the sprite worm preserved in this amber. Isaiah was also curious. He replied in a loud voice, "Yes, sir, I will personally supervise the serfs in looking for the amber." After the administrative officer left, List was still playing with the amber. He began to think. He always believed that every reward from the smoke mission was valuable, except for the wind peregrine falcon. That damned bird, it never came back. He should have killed it and eaten it back then. Since the smoke mission sent this amber and specifically mentioned that it contains magic power, what does it mean? Is it a natural magic equipment like the Black Pearl? That's not right. The magic power does not originate from the amber, but from the spirit worm in the amber. However, the spirit worm should have integrated with the amber, right? Tens of millions of years of infiltration. The amber and the things wrapped have long been inseparable, leaving only the original structure. So, what is the use of this amber? Is it an ornament? List shook his head and made a decision. Let Chrissy study it to see if she can find any valuable clues. It just so happens that she is about to become my second great wizard. Chrissy's promotion to a great wizard had not happened yet, but it would happen soon. Because the smoke mission had already plucked this thread of fate. Mission: Flower Town Restaurant's chef Pavel is very interested in the tofu reward issued by the Lord. However, he has tried a variety of bean products, but was unable to make tofu. This has already cost him all his savings, but he still does not give up. Why not support him in continuing to study tofu? Reward: a great wizard. Tofu. This was List's biggest complaint. He knew that tofu was made from beans, but what was brine he still did not understand. He had offered a reward early on, hoping that someone could make beans into soft gelatinous food. However, more than a year had passed, and still no chef had been able to complete this research. However, it had spawned many surprises: fermented beans, soy milk, bean sprouts. No. It seemed that the dawn of tofu had arrived. List did not hesitate to support Pavel with 10 gold coins and let him continue to study tofu. He also told Bao Pavel everything he knew about tofu, hoping that it would help Bao Pavel develop the long-awaited tofu sooner. It would also allow Chrissy Truth to advance to a great wizard sooner. Apart from Chrissy, there was only Paris among the wizards of the fief. Paris was obviously not mature enough, so it could only be that Chrissy was about to advance. In the magic workshop. Due to the lack of magic ingredients, Chrissy only needed to take 7 or 8 days a month to make magic potions from the fief's magic ingredients. The rest of the time was used to study advanced magic and magic arrays. In essence, advanced magic was an even more advanced magic array. Sir Viscount, why are you here? Chrissy was a little surprised. List had just come to pick up the magic ingredients yesterday. List smiled. Are you still studying advanced magic? I'm studying black pearls and pink pearls. These 2 pearls are natural magic arrays and have given me a lot of inspiration. I have also begun to try to make them into magic equipment. Black pearls and pink pearls are indeed very good research materials, but I have brought you another precious material, which may give you new inspiration. With that, List took out a palm-sized oblate amber and handed it to Chrissy. She only took a glance. Chrissy exclaimed, "What is this, a gem? It is so beautiful. I have never seen such a gem before, and it even contains a sprite worm? This is amber, a treasure formed from a wonderful misunderstanding tens of millions of years ago." List explained the origin of amber. It was not an exaggeration to say that amber was a treasure. Chapter 499. This chapter is Bitter Tree. Reward added. Chrissy couldn't bear to part with the amber sprite worm and immediately prepared to study its secrets, which required time. List did not stay in the magic workshop for long. After returning to the castle, he began to try to cultivate. Recently he had advanced to a Sky Knight. Mid-rank Chi was reborn into high-rank Chi, and then continuously evolved into Dragon Chi, which made his cultivation plan stumble. So far he had not figured out much. He needed to wait for his body to stabilize before he could properly calculate the data. However, cultivating Red Sun Rising Fire Burning was not a problem. The high-rank Chi secret manual's moves were already very vague. This high-rank Chi secret manual had a total of 17 moves. It was divided into 2 grades. One was the ordinary moves, and the other was the accumulated moves. There were 12 ordinary moves and 5 accumulated moves. These 5 moves were Red Sun Full Wheel, Rising Sun, Blazing Sun Piercing, Setting Sun Falling, and Burning Red Clouds. High-rank Chi secret manuals did not have the ultimate meaning. The 12 ordinary moves were not difficult. With List's memory and perception, it would not take him much time to learn them. In fact, he had already begun to study these 12 ordinary moves when he was an elite Earth Knight. Although he could not use them with mid-rank Chi, he could still simulate them. Now he only needed to practice and be calm during cultivation. However, the accumulated moves were much more difficult. They involved the operation mechanism of high-rank Chi and required a lot of practice and experimentation before he could truly succeed in cultivating them. List had not learned any of the accumulated moves for the time being. So it was. Time quickly passed and it was night. After dinner, List immediately rushed to the Seascape Villa. Achi, who had salvaged the sky ship, should have returned. When he arrived at the seascape villa, it was indeed so. Achi greeted him at the door. "Brother, you're back." "I came back in the morning." "When did you come to the house?" "When it was dark." "By the way, brother, Achi has moved all the valuable things from the sunken ship." Achi took List to another room which was stacked with a lot of ragged things. "It's all here. There are a lot of boxes that can't be opened." "Box?" Now that the box was mentioned, List was inexplicably excited. First, he tidied up all the boxes and put them aside. He did not open them immediately. These boxes were densely packed with patterns, similar to the floating bottles used by the Sun's Child to send messages. The patterns formed some relatively abstract patterns, vaguely distinguishable as a forest. In the forest there were mountains, rivers, bears, eagles, fish, and some abstract humans. There were also some strange musical instruments, bows and arrows. There's no lock. Evidently this chest also required the blood of old Phil of the tanner's shop. I'll have to collect some blood from old Phil. The more the better. However, I heard that the middle-aged widow that old Phil found seems to be pregnant? List thought to himself. Since the floating bottle was not very useful, he had not been paying attention to old Phil recently. After all, he had already accumulated quite a lot of blood. If the middle-aged widow that old Phil found was really pregnant and gave birth to a child, there would be no need to worry about the bloodline of the descendants of the sun. After sorting out the boxes, the remaining rags were all damaged objects. It could barely be seen that they were pots, barrels, swords, bows and arrows, wooden sticks, armor, ropes and so on. There were also some stones inlaid on the damaged objects, which were probably gems but were now dull. How long has it been soaked in the sea for even gems to decay into stones? List cast magic eyes and saw that there was no magic reaction in this pile of rags. It can be inferred that the date of the sky ship's sinking was definitely not in the near future, at least hundreds or even thousands of years ago. If it was not in the last 100 years, then it means that the sky ship did not come to pick up the descendants of the sun, which is not in conflict with the appearance of the communication floating bottle. However, why did this sky ship sink in the waters near Black Horse Island hundreds of years ago? Black Horse Island was an island formed by the volcanic eruption of the fire dragon. List wondered if the fire dragon's death had something to do with the sky ship. Perhaps the sky ship had come to excavate the fire dragon's ruins, or perhaps the sky ship and the fire dragon had fought each other, and both sides suffered heavy losses and sank here. Thinking of this, he asked Achi, "Achi, is there any sign of damage to this shipwreck?" "I don't know, brother. Half of the shipwreck is buried in the mud on the seabed." Achi only cleaned the cabin part. However, the part exposed to the mud, the main structure does not seem to be damaged, but a lot of the ship's boards are gone. There are also a lot of fish and shrimp living in it. It was normal for some of the less strong structures to decay after sinking for too long. So did you see human bones on the ship? I don't think so. The cabin is very clean, only some boxes. Listening to Achi, List immediately ruled out the possibility that the fire dragon and the sky ship were both wounded. With the power of the fire dragon, it was possible to tear the sky ship apart. He suddenly asked again, "Achi, what's the difference between that shipwreck and my ship?" "There should be a big difference between the sky ship and ordinary ships." Achi thought about it and replied, "There seems to be no mast and Achi can't tell." "Brother, the shipwreck is too old and the hull is covered with all kinds of corals." List did not force her. Sooner or later he would salvage the sky ship. So he said directly, "Achi, you go and rest. I'm going to carefully study what's in these boxes." Well, Achi is going to read. Recently, Achi has been working hard to learn magic arrays. Good, my good Achi. Sending the siren Achi away. List directly put a box into the gem space, and then smeared old Phil's blood in the gem space. But to his surprise, there was no reaction at all when the blood was smeared. What's going on? Is everything in the gem space still, and even the reaction of this blood is still? List waited for a moment and chose to take out the box again. After taking it out, the reaction began instantly. He saw the lines on the box and magic threads flashed, forming a dynamic picture. Bears, eagles, people, mountains and flowing water flashed one by one. Finally, it seemed that the setting sun was falling, hitting the lid of the box. There was a click. The box opened. List learned the lesson of salvaging the treasure chest from the shipwreck and quickly put the box into the gem space to prevent the items inside from being exposed to the air and directly oxidizing and decaying. He put it into the gem space. He extended his spirit and began to observe the items in the box in another way. What surprised him was that it was filled with seeds. The seeds of some kind of plant. Seeds with a touch of magic power. Chapter 500. It was a box of seeds shaped like fava beans, but they were certainly not fava beans because of their gorgeous colors. There were black, white, red, yellow, purple, green, blue, gray. All of them were monochromatic, but the colors were different and there were many more colors than the rainbow. Some of the seeds could be observed with magic eyes. The magic power of chaos had no color attribute. But most of the seeds did not have magic light. These should be the seeds of the same kind of plant. The ones with magic power are potion seeds, and the ones without magic power are ordinary seeds? Liszt swallowed and quickly denied this judgment. No, the same green fava beans, some have magic power, some have no magic power, and the other colors are the same. Fava beans of the same color should be the same kind, but they showed two forms of magic power and no magic power. Moreover, the magic power of the fava beans was not the same, and even Liszt found that the magic power of several fava beans was almost invisible. These are probably because they have been stored for too long, and the magic power has been lost, resulting in their current appearance? Does this mean that these fava beans were once potion seeds? Thinking of this, his heart was even more fiery. With so many kinds of potions he was simply going to make a fortune. However, he quickly furrowed his brows. There are potion seeds, but I don't have the relevant sprites. How can I plant them? The growth of potions was inseparable from the influence of the worm stalk. Once separated from the worm stalk, the potion would soon lose its magic power and return to ordinary plants. This box of potion seeds was very obvious. They were not any of the plants known to Liszt, and naturally there was no corresponding sprite worm. Therefore the idea of planting potions was just a dream. It was as if a basin of cold water had been poured from head to toe. His heart was cold. Am I rejoicing for nothing? He was stunned for a moment but soon regained his composure. There were still 12 boxes left, which could be examined slowly. Maybe there were sprite worms behind. It seemed unlikely. Sprite worms did not have such a long lifespan. He opened the second box in the same way, and immediately put it into the gem space and then examined it again. This box was also full of seeds, but it was a kind of oblate seed. Golden yellow, the size of a pinky nail, it was also a potion seed. Some had magic, some didn't. The third box was filled with seeds, the fourth box was filled with seeds, all the way to the 10th box were filled with potion seeds. Each of the 10 boxes contained different seeds, all of which Liszt had never seen before. Some were like beans, some were like grains, some were as big as a fist, and some were as small as sesame seeds. With such a large number and complete variety of potion seeds, it should have been a joyous harvest. But the more Liszt looked at it, the more he felt suffocated. Only the seeds were given but not the elves. This was like seeing but not being able to eat. He was anxious. There were only 3 boxes left. With a solemn and stirring heart, he opened the first box. This time the box did not contain potion seeds but books. Books were neatly stacked vertically, and there were complicated characters on the spines of the books. He could tell at a glance that it was the Sun language. He could even recognize quite a few words. He hadn't read the diary of a descendant of the Phillips Sun for nothing. XXX Sun Tower XX Construction XX? Liszt saw the title of one of the books. He couldn't recognize the Sun language, but he could guess the general idea. It seemed to be a book on how to build the Sun Tower. He then looked at the next book. XXX Transformation XX Bear X. The next few books were similar in format. They were all XXX Transformation XX Eagle X, XXX Transformation XX Leopard X, XXX Transformation XXXXXX, and so on. Liszt didn't recognize many of the Sun language, so he could only guess. The first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth books all seemed to be about transformations. Could it be that the Sun's children can transform into bears, eagles, leopards, and so on? He pulled out one of the books titled XXX Transformation XX Bear X. The book was well preserved and showed no signs of decay. The cover was very soft and delicate, like some kind of leaf. The paper inside was also very thin, similar to the paper he found in the messenger bottle. On the first page there was a beautiful colorful drawing. If not for the traces of lines, Liszt would have thought it was a photograph. In the drawing was a huge bear with brown fur and huge fangs. As he continued to flip the pages, it was densely packed with Sun language. At a glance, Liszt found that the Sun language he had learned from The Diary of a Descendant of the Sun Philip was not enough to support the content in the book at all. Indeed, he could recognize a few Sun language words, but he couldn't understand them at all. Dizzy, let's change to the next book. The next book was XXX Transformation XXXX. The first colorful drawing was of a dolphin, so the title of this book should be XXX Transformation XX Dolphin X. The next book was a colorful drawing of a tree that could walk, so the title of this book should be XXX Transformation XX Tree X. The next book was a colorful drawing of a chubby bird that seemed to be unable to fly and walked on its feet. Liszt had never seen it before, so he couldn't be sure what it was called. He couldn't even find a comparable species. It had the posture of a penguin, but it looked like an oversized owl. Let's just call it Moonbeast. Anyway, it's just a translated name, so it doesn't matter if it's accurate or not. So this book was called XXX Transformation XX Moonbeast X. At this point, it could be learned that the transformation magic of the sun's child included 6 kinds of transformation: bear, leopard, eagle, dolphin, tree, and moonbeast. Transformation magic, which makes me think of the profession, druid. It seems that in the notes left behind by Kurdish Truth, there was mention of druids, juxtaposing them with mages, liches, alchemists, and so on. Perhaps the first 3 sun words in the title mean druid? Druid Transformation XX Bear X? The rest of the sun language in the title couldn't be guessed no matter how hard he tried. He quickly put down the book and continued reading. But for the following books, he didn't recognize a single sun word in the title, let alone guess what it meant. The second to last box was still a book. This made Liszt a little conflicted. He liked to read, but sun language was a foreign language book, and with his vocabulary he couldn't understand it at all. He wasn't an archaeologist who could spend a lot of time studying these books, summarizing and determining the meaning of each sun word. So, these books had the same effect on him as those potion seeds. They all seemed very precious, but in fact they were useless. There's only one last box left. Don't tell me that this box still contains potion seeds or books. Liszt opened the last box uneasily. Immediately, the contents of the box came into view. It wasn't potion seeds, nor was it a sun book. Instead, it was a golden scepter that had been broken in 2. One was a metal rod carved with dense patterns, and the other was a decoration shaped like the sun that emitted a brilliant light. In the center of the radiant sun was a huge broken golden gem. Chapter 501. Although the golden sun scepter was broken into 2, one could still see how magnificent it was when it was intact. This was definitely a divine artifact of extraordinary value, and the person who possessed it was definitely a great figure with great power and influence. Liszt reached out and took out the remaining half of the scepter. It was a stick with a metallic texture, but he could not tell what kind of metal it was made of. The weight was moderate, slightly lighter than an iron stick of the same size. The patterns on it were very regular, with rings on top of each other, but he could not tell what it meant. At the end of the scepter was a hexagonal cylinder the length of a finger. At the cross-section of the fracture, there was a crisscrossed gap. It was not cut or smashed, but seemed like a fracture caused by some kind of stress. So it is not a type of metal, but a metal stick that was poured layer by layer. Liszt looked at the color of the fracture and concluded. This was because the fracture had changes similar to growth rings. In the middle was a transparent triangle only as thick as a finger, like some kind of crystal. The outer ring was a silver-white metal, circular and wrapped around the triangular crystal. The outer ring was a gray metal hexagonal structure. Then there was a light blue metal circular structure. The outermost ring was a golden metal, also circular and as thick as a baby's arm. The colors of these 5 layers were clearly defined, but they were very closely arranged and the thickness was uniform, almost blending into one. This kind of forging technique was beyond Liszt's understanding. At least the Grand Duchy of Sapphire did not have an iron knight, which could forge such a precise metal. He put down the lower half of the sun scepter and picked up the upper half. The structure of the sun at the top of the upper half was hard to describe. Inside was a ring, and the center of the ring was inlaid with a golden gemstone the size of an adult man's fist. The gemstone was not round, but irregular meteorite-shaped, transparent like a diamond. Unfortunately, the gemstone was already broken, and the largest crack was as thick as a fingernail. But even so, the golden gemstone was still blinding, which showed how dazzling it was when it was intact. Outside the inner ring there was another layer of rings. The shape of this ring was somewhat similar to the shape of the golden moon wheel in the legend of Shu Mountain. It was round, but there was a small gap like a crescent moon. On the outer ring in the shape of a crescent moon, lights of various sizes were arranged. They were lights represented by long metal needles. Some were long, some were short, and there was no pattern to their arrangement. However, the longest needle was at an angle of 45 degrees up and 45 degrees down. Whether it was the inner ring or the outer ring, the material was the same as the golden metal of the handle. What kind of divine weapon is this? Was it a weapon or a magical equipment? Is it a status symbol or a magic staff wielded by a sorcerer? Liszt connected the two parts of the scepter together. The fractured surface could be matched, but there was no reaction. As far as he could see, none of the magicians in this world were waving their magic wands. They might wear some magic equipment to enhance their magic power, but they didn't need to wave their magic wands or chant magic spells. As for the weapon and equipment level of the Sun Scepter, Liszt couldn't judge it either. According to the information he had obtained from night novels and magic books, the top divine weapon was the Dragon Soul. A weapon forged by infusing the dragon's soul into the dragon's bones had amazing power. Next were the Dragon Elf weapon and the Dragon Tooth weapon. However, none of these three weapons had appeared in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. In addition, there were the Great Elf weapon and the Dragon Bone weapon. There was a Great Elf weapon in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. It was the Archduke's sword, the Wailing Cage sword. As for the Dragon Bone weapon, the sword that emitted blue flames in the hands of Marquis Bull during the Battle of Ironhoof Island made Liszt wonder if it was a Dragon Bone weapon. Then there were the Little Elf weapon and the Gemstone weapon. Liszt had both the Swift Shadow Bow and the Red Blood sword. Judging from the materials used to make the Sun Scepter, it is at most a gemstone weapon. However, the gemstone inlaid is a bit too big. Generally, gemstones were very small. A gemstone the size of an adult man's fist was really rare. Moreover, its golden color was different from that of ordinary gemstones. Liszt had seen a similar color of topaz. At the Longtaro Castle during the New Year's festival, Grandpa gave cousin Raleigh a topaz pendant, but the color of the topaz was yellow, not gold. Unfortunately, the golden gemstone had been broken, and the magic eye could not see any magic power in it. It had become a useless gemstone. Liszt put all 13 boxes into the gem space. Although he couldn't understand those books and didn't know how to plant those seeds, he might find their value in the future. As for the Sun Scepter, he planned to keep it even if it was already useless. He would find a chance to repair it later. It could still be used to keep up appearances. Except for the things in the boxes, the other things that Achi salvaged were of no value. It could not be said that they were worthless, perhaps they had high archaeological value, but the archaeological value was still worthless for Liszt at present. Achi, I've taken the boxes away. You should rest early and don't stay up late. Okay. Leaving the Seaview Villa and returning to the castle, Liszt was not sleepy. The mini fire dragon was still sleeping in the heart position and would not wake up for a while. After reading a book similar to the Sun Scripture, Liszt's eyes were swollen. He sighed and put the book back. Let's go to sleep. I'll get up tomorrow to make a glass greenhouse and plant a batch of potion seeds. Liszt got to work. Early the next morning he asked for a batch of glass produced by the Fire Dragon Brick Factory. Now that the glass had been officially put into production, the cooperation with Tulip Castle was continuing and the profit sharing was being negotiated. Glass that could be mass-produced was bound to hit the crystal market. The price was not easy to grasp. With the discovery of quartz ore, Liszt had sent people to many places on Coral Island to find quartz ore. The raw materials were plentiful. Although the glass still had a lot of impurities and the color was not transparent enough. But it was more than enough to make a glass greenhouse. Liszt directed the servants to bond and fix the glass with wood and rubber. Soon, a small glass greenhouse was built in the castle's garden. Next, Liszt selected a batch of seeds without magic power from the potion seeds and tried to plant them. He watered and fertilized them, waiting for them to germinate. To ensure the indoor temperature, he also placed a small magic fire dragon in the glass greenhouse. With the small magic fire dragon baking, the temperature of the glass greenhouse was enough to reach more than 10 degrees, which was more suitable for the seeds to germinate. Seeds without magic power can hopefully still germinate. He wanted to see what kind of plants could be grown by planting them. Knowing the type of plant, he could buy the corresponding sprite worm and plant the potion. Even if there was no corresponding sprite worm, he could still cultivate it generation by generation. In case a sprite worm was born in one generation, wouldn't he be able to plant the potion again? Chapter 502. This chapter is Hua Fei Hua. Empty words. 10,000 rewards. Gort, who was responsible for glass sales negotiations in Coral City, bought 3 second-hand cargo ships for the territory. The cargo ships had not yet been refurbished and were temporarily dispatched to the new port of Black Horse Island to participate in the salvage of the Sky Ship. With the combined pulling power of 6 ships, the Sky Ship was finally dragged from the bottom of the sea to the seaside. List watched the salvage at the scene. At this time it was snowing heavily, and the beach was covered with a layer of ice and snow. But snowflakes could not bring List, who was wearing a frac abier and a gold-rimmed red and black cloak, a cold experience. Since he was promoted to a Sky Knight and gained high-grade fire attribute chi, he was no longer afraid of the cold. And the high-grade fire attribute chi was gradually changing towards dragon chi. The fire dragon was obviously not afraid of the cold, and List, who was covered in dragon chi, naturally could not feel the cold. The feathered chocobo Loki was also not afraid of the cold. Its tall legs stepped on the snow, and there was a thick cuticle to keep it warm. "My lord, the sunken ship has been towed up," Blair said excitedly. List naturally saw it. The overall shape of the Sky Ship could be seen in its entirety. It was a ship more similar to the ancient ships of China, without masts and sails. The hull was narrow and slender, but it was very large. Overall, it was larger than the most advanced 3-masted sailing ship of this era. He had ridden in the palace's exclusive 3-masted fast-sailing ship, which was obviously not as big as the Sky Ship. Blair was still excitedly analyzing. "There are no sails and masts, it should be a paddle boat." Looking at its hull covered with coral and shells, it must have been sunk for at least hundreds of years. Hundreds of years ago, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire was still a deserted island. I don't know which country developed such a large paddle boat. Paddle boat? List did not correct Blair's analysis but said, "You command the salvage staff to carefully clean up the items on the ship after dragging the sunken ship up. Also clean up all the coral and shells attached to it. I want to see the original appearance of this sunken ship." "Yes, my lord." Blair quickly commanded the serfs to clean up the ship. List rode on his chocobo, flying around the airship to observe it. Because he knew that the ship sailed in the sky, he could see that the ship was a little strange from this perspective. It was hard to tell how it flew. It did not have wings like an airplane, nor did it have air sacs like a hot air balloon. List was more willing to believe that the Sky Ship relied on magic rather than physical means of flight. Perhaps it was some kind of magic array. The Sky Ship might even be a piece of magical equipment. But now, this ship in the sky was modeled to the point that it looked like the habitat of shrimps and crabs. 13 treasure chests containing potion seeds, books, and scepters were taken away by a chi, as well as some other items that looked decent. There was basically nothing good on this ship. The serfs kept cleaning, but what they took out were piles and piles of junk. There were rusty weapons, broken utensils, and a lot of things that couldn't be identified. However, just when List was not looking forward to it, in the second half of the shipwreck that was buried in silt, the serfs dug out the silt from the cabin and finally found something good. There were a total of 3 cabins that were intact. One of the cabins was full of wood. He didn't know what kind of wood it was, but it was just branches that were no thicker than an arm. He didn't know if it was buried for too long, but the branches seemed to have sprouted midway, but eventually died and became wood. List took a branch and cast Magic Eye, but he didn't find any magic. He tried to break it, and found that the hardness of the branch was even harder than the thorny ironwood, comparable to the hundreds of years old rockwood. Very good wood, transport them to the port town to be stacked. For the time being, they are not allowed to be used. Without fully understanding what these branches were for, List would not let them be used casually. The second cabin was full of metal ores. They had a light blue metallic luster and were not rusty. This color quickly reminded List of the light blue metal in the 4th ring of the Sun Scepter. These 2 kinds of metals were obviously the same kind of metal, worth collecting and studying. In the 3rd cabin there were no treasures. But there were skeletons. "My lord, there are a total of 21 skeletons, only bones are left and their clothes have long been tattered. Bring out a skeleton." Soon, a skeleton was brought in front of List. The white bones were not much different from those of humans, which showed that the Sun's child race was indeed a human race. Philip and Old Phil, the descendants of the Sun, were normal humans, and their ancestors were unlikely to look like aliens. But there were still subtle differences. From the skeleton, it could be seen that the Sun's child had a longer leg ratio than humans, and had a pair of long legs. Apart from that, List didn't find anything new. Moreover, he suddenly thought, maybe the long legs are just an exception. From Old Phil I didn't find long legs. On the contrary, I have a pair of long legs. He didn't know if it was because they ate too much long taro, but the Taro family all had long legs. This is a female skeleton. Marcus, who participated in the salvage of the sunken ship, had already washed the mud off his body and walked over. My lord, this female is probably 1.8 meters tall and her skeleton is a little slender. Judging from the degree of closure of her epiphysis, she may be underage. Female? Underage? Teacher Marcus, you know how to observe bones? Unlike the nobles who practice qi, when we commoners practice qi in the Night Academy, there are teachers who teach us how to judge the direction of the meridians based on the bones. I learned a little more and have seen the bones of many different people. At that time, I even thought about how to use bones to make my archery more lethal. I see, then continue to analyze this skeleton for me. Yes, my lord. Marcus squatted down and observed the bones bit by bit. The leg ratio is longer than the average person, the pelvis has not been opened, probably has not given birth. Other than that, I can't judge. After that, no more bones were taken out and Marcus analyzed them one by one. All the skeletons belonged to miners ranging from 1.9 meters to 1.3 meters with different heights. There were males and females and their leg ratio was more prominent. But there were more differences from humans. It could be said that the sun's child race was a race of humans with longer legs. At this time, the cleaning of the ship's exterior was also completed. A large number of corals and shells were peeled off, revealing the true appearance of the ship in the sky, a ship with an outer shell almost peeled off, leaving only the main structure. Chapter 503. This chapter is titled, My Horse Feeds the Sheep. With a gentle push on Loki's neck, List flew into the air and landed on the deck of the sky ship. Following the path Costo pointed out, he could clearly see what the keel of the sky ship looked like. It was indeed a whole branch. The branch started from the bow of the ship. There was no collision angle, but two branches extended to the bottom of the ship, forming three parallel lines with the main branch. These three parallel lines formed the main keel and the side keels on both sides. Together they formed the main structure of the ship. On top of the three keels, there were many branches that extended to both sides, forming the ribs. In other words, the main core structure of the sky ship was made up of a branch. However, this branch was very standard and symmetrical, as if it was cast from a mold. The other structures were constantly pieced together on this trunk. If one looked closely, one could still see that many parts were the same as the keel, a whole branch. This was a sky ship that was grown out of various branches. It's really incredible. List could not help but exclaim, this kind of technology is definitely beyond this era. No nobles in our country have this kind of technology. Sir, our country's shipbuilding industry is the most developed. If our country can't build such a big ship, I think, only the Moon Empire has the ability to build such a big ship. Marcus, who had climbed up, analyzed confidently, this ship may have sunk at the bottom of the sea for thousands of years. The Moon Empire was a good pot. Anything that could not be understood or explained could be put on the Moon Empire. Naturally, List would not reveal that this was a sky ship made by the sun's child race from another continent. So he also put the blame, I think so too. Only the Moon Empire had the power to build such a big ship. We actually salvaged a sunken ship from the Moon Empire. This is so great. Blair praised sincerely, the glory of the night really favors you in this territory. In traditional knowledge, the ruins of the Moon Empire were synonymous with treasures. This sunken ship had obviously been identified as a type of ruins. Salvaging it was a common way to obtain treasures in Knight's novels. It was a way that everyone was eager to get rich. Of course, in List's territory, except for the commercial and agricultural income, all other products belonged to List. This sunken ship also completely belonged to List. Costo, you are more familiar with ships. Do you think it's possible to transform this ship into a sailboat? List tested the hardness of the branch. Even though it had been soaked in the sea for countless years, it was still strong and showed no signs of decay. The main structure of the ship was still intact. Costo thought about it carefully. I think it's possible, my lord. We have stonewood in our inventory to make masts and thorny ironwood to supplement the other parts of the hull. Together with the intact keel of this sunken ship from the Moon Empire, we can make a fast sailboat. However, we don't have the shipbuilding technology. List transported a lot of serfs and craftsmen from the mainland, but he didn't have any shipbuilders. Only the Sapphire Grand Duchy had shipbuilders, especially those who could build large sailboats. The technology was concentrated in the hands of a few great clans. If we don't have the skills, we'll just have to figure it out. We'll train our own boatmen. He had even refurbished a few cargo ships, so there was no need to worry about not having enough EXP. With rubber as an excellent bonding material, I believe that even a randomly assembled ship can sail on the sea, List said solemnly. The flower, the thorns, the pearl, the mangrove, and the 3 newly purchased freighters. The serfs in the territory could also learn a lot of shipbuilding techniques. Advanced sailboats were definitely not easy to build, but sailboats in this era did not have high technical content. With rubber instead of rivets, shipbuilding technology was reduced to the level of building blocks to a large extent. As long as one wasn't a fool, one could build a sailboat of this era with enough practice. The tree branches, light blue metal, and 21 skeletons in the cabin were transported to Port Town for storage. As for the main body of the sky ship, List spent several days studying it. The only thing he was sure of was that the tree branches used to make the keel were the same as the ones stored in the cabin. There were no more discoveries, so he handed it over to Blair to organize the serfs and try to convert the sky ship into a sailboat. My plan is for you to select the quick-witted ones from this batch of serfs and train them into shipwrights. Yes, my lord. Then List told Costo, you are the navigation instructor of the territory. I hope you can train more sailors as soon as possible. I will continue to replenish the cargo ships in the following time. You must have enough sailors and be sure to train more suitable captains, first officers, and other senior crew members. My lord, I am afraid it will be difficult in a short time. The serfs shipped from the mainland are landlubbers. They don't even dare to swim. It is very difficult for them to overcome their fear of the sea. I will let Consultant Gort give you sufficient support. What you need is to train qualified sailors for me. As you wish, my lord. When leaving Black Horse Island, List took some branches and light blue metal with him. He wanted to continue studying. Items that could be hoarded in the cabin of the sky ship were definitely not ordinary items. In particular, this kind of branch could grow into keel, which was simply unimaginable. If I study this branch thoroughly, does it mean that I can make my own sky ship? Even if I can't make a sky ship, I can continue to make sailboats for sailing on the sea. A naturally grown keel is obviously stronger than a riveted keel. In addition to his research, he often visited the glass greenhouse. Unfortunately, after 5 days, there were still no seeds germinating in the glass greenhouse. He didn't know if it was not time or if the temperature was not right, or if the seeds were dead. He still had the patience to wait. But on the other hand, he was gradually losing patience. Barwell, haven't you made tofu yet? List came to the flower restaurant and asked the chef Barwell. It has been more than a week since he funded Barwell. There was still no sign of tofu. Barwell was a little flustered. He got a sponsorship of 10 gold coins and hired 10 assistants, but there was still no research results. I'm sorry, my lord, I haven't found a way to make tofu yet. As soon as possible. Although List was anxious, he was still patient and did not express it. After all, the other party was the recommended candidate for the smoke mission. Perhaps the success of tofu depended on Barwell. If he urged too much, it might hinder the emergence of tofu. After urging Barwell, List chatted with Chris Truth again. One reason was to take away this month's potion. Secondly, it was to see if she had any intention of becoming a great mage. If she directly broke through and became a great mage, there was no need to rush the smoke mission. Chapter 504. The amber of the sprite worm was still glistening yellow and unbelievably beautiful. However, in the eyes of Crazy Truth, it had another layer of beauty. Sir Viscount, what kind of existence do you think sprites are? I had a chat with Glanny Truth and he explained to me the triangular relationship between spirit, matter, and magic power. List thought for a moment before replying. I somewhat agree with his understanding. The fusion of matter and magic power, under specific conditions, creates an individual's spirit. You mean, sprites are a fusion between plants and magic power, accidentally creating a spirit, thereby bestowing life upon individuals? I believe that whether it is sprites or dragons, they all originate from this. List earnestly explained. He himself was currently breeding a fire dragon, so he had a very profound understanding of it. I don't know where spirit comes from, but I think that everything begins from a seed. Seed? Plants germinate from a seed and grow into a flower or a towering tree. Sprites are also equivalent to being born from a seed. No one has clearly explained the birth of dragons, but perhaps they were also born from a seed. Moreover, humans are also born from a seed. Crazy was surprised. How can a human be a seed? This involves human physiology. Let me use frogs as an example. Have you ever seen the eggs laid by frogs in a ditch? In fact, those eggs are a masterpiece of male and female frogs. Each egg is a seed that can become a small tadpole in the future and then grow into a frog. Chris frowned and replied after a while, "I'm sorry, Lord Viscount, but I've never seen frog eggs." List smiled awkwardly, "Then you have seen a hen lay an egg." In fact, an egg can also be regarded as a seed. Ordinary eggs can be said to have no spirit, no soul. It is the same as a plant seed, but in the process of gestation, it eventually has a soul. It must have produced spirit in some way. Is it the same for humans? Crazy asked modestly. She had long discovered that the young aristocratic lord she was attached to was even more knowledgeable than a great wizard in some aspects. The same is true for humans, but humans hatch in the mother's belly, which is considered viviparous. Animals such as cows, horses, and sheep are also viviparous. Actually, regardless of whether it's an animal or a human, they're just a seed in the beginning. They're just pure matter, and their spiritual powers are obtained later on. List tried his best to be concise and comprehensive, explaining the origin of life to Chris. He then connected the dots to the elves and the dragons. But after a round of explanations, not only did Chris not understand the relationship between the seeds, elves, and dragons, but he also went around it and felt that there was really no connection. So he decisively changed the topic. "You just asked me what kind of existence the elves are, right?" "Yes." "I think elves are very magical creatures." Chrissy smiled. It was unclear if she understood List's dry humor. She began to explain what she knew. "When I was studying the amber, I discovered that the magical structure wrapped in amber is actually a kind of magic array. The reason why the sprite worm inside is still reacting with magic power is because its magic array did not collapse." "Magic array?" "That's right. That's why I believe that the elves are a special kind of magic array. Once you understand this magic array, you will be able to use it to achieve the same magical effects as the elves." List suddenly became spirited. "So, do you understand?" "Sorry, I don't understand. The complexity of the magic array that makes up the sprite worm is beyond my imagination. I think that even archwizards might not be able to decipher such a complex magic array. The dynamic magic array that great wizards need to master is already complex enough. The magic array of the sprite worm is countless times more complex than the dynamic magic array. So, what is the use of this amber and how can it help you? Perhaps this amber can be designed into a magical equipment that can replace the worm stalk, but I don't know how to design it. As for the help it can give me, enlightening me about magical arrays is the greatest help it can give me." Chrissy paused and then said solemnly, "Sir Viscount, I am going to meditate for a few days and try to attack the great wizard realm. Is there anything I can help you with?" "Not for the time being." "Well, take the sprite worm amber first. Maybe it can give you some inspiration when attacking the great wizard realm." "Thank you." Chrissy finally began to attack the great wizard realm. The development of tofu released by the smoke mission has not yet produced any results. List did not have much work to do for the time being, but he lived a fulfilling life every day, even from morning to night. He had no time to be idle. Training the dog, practicing, and feeding the small fire dragon occupied most of his time every day. The magic of the fire dragon was decreasing day by day, and the volcanic glass that could be mined on Black Horse Island was getting closer and closer to exhaustion. The mini fire dragon thrived and fell asleep immediately after eating and drinking. At the same time, it constantly excreted impurities of magic, helping List's dragon chi to grow. The cultivation of the high-level chi secret manual Red Sun Rising Fire went smoothly. Every day List would soar in the sky and constantly stimulate the chocobo Loki to fly. Loki's body was no longer developing. Obviously, the effect of the bloodline fruit had been fully released, and its abilities had been greatly improved. Judging from the magic dissipation, it was already comparable to Dosen and had become a mid-level dragon beast. However, it still only knew one kind of magic and its growing wings were still white and could not fly. On this day after practicing, List went to the glass greenhouse as usual. He loosened the soil, removed the weeds, and waited for the potion seeds to germinate. However, it had been a week and a half since the seeds had been planted, and the potion seeds had not yet germinated. His hope for these seeds to survive was getting smaller and smaller. But when he studied the books of the sun, he had some new inspiration. The Sun's Child, Skyship, Tree City, Druid, Long Legs, Sun Scepter, Potion Seed. I feel that the Sun's Child race seems to be a bit similar to the elves in the Western legends of the Earth. It is the kind of tall and handsome elves who live in the forest and are very good at archery. But thinking about the appearance of the descendant of the sun, old Phil, it did not seem to be handsome. Then he thought again. The continent where the sun's child lived was probably on the other side of the Devil's Sea. But the ruins of the sky ship sunk on Black Horse Island, which had crossed the Devil's Sea and Aquamarine Sea. This showed that the other side of the continent and the continent where he was located had been in communication a long time ago. The descendants of the sun were exiled to the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, which was also proof. Thousands of years ago there was a human country called the Moon Empire, and there was a group of sun's child on the other side of the continent. One was called the moon, and the other was called the sun. Is there any connection? Is the sky ship a tool for communication between different human races on the two continents? There was too little information. There was no way to make a substantive judgment. He lowered his head and continued to weed the soil of the glass greenhouse. The potion seeds did not germinate, but all kinds of weeds were rushing to germinate. At this moment, when his small shovel dug up a weed, he suddenly found that under the loose soil, there was a potion seed being pushed up. The potion seed had split open and a greenish-white bud stretched out, pushing it from the soil to the surface of the soil, almost breaking out of the soil. Chapter 505. The seed had just sprouted and had not yet broken through the soil. Therefore List did not disturb it. He just released magic eyes and observed for a while, but found no signs of magic power. It seemed that this potion had degenerated into an ordinary plant with the seed. It's good that it can germinate. As long as I know what plant it is, I can find the corresponding sprite worm. Also, with the existence of the smoke mission, I believe that the probability of these plants breeding sprite worms will be very high. List, in a good mood, personally watered and fertilized. After all this was done, today's daily research was carried out. When he arrived at the blacksmith shop in Flower Town, the steward in charge of the blacksmith shop came to report, "Sir Lord, our research on the light blue metal is not going well. The forging of this metal is no less difficult than forging mithril. Perhaps only an Iron Knight can complete the forging. An Iron Knight is a blacksmith who cultivates chi. Generally, one must become an Earth Knight to obtain the title of Iron Knight. Their chi has a special nature, and the chi secret books they cultivate are also different. All their skills are used for forging. Magic metals such as mithril, orichalcum, and adamantine can only be forged by an Iron Knight. So, this light blue metal may be a magic metal? I don't know, Sir Lord." The steward replied in a low voice, "The blacksmiths in our blacksmith shop burn the best charcoal with a blast bag, so that the temperature in the furnace reaches the highest, but still can't melt it, let alone deform it by beating." List nodded. He suddenly felt that he should use the fire dragon magic to build a stronger iron furnace for the blacksmith shop. Perhaps the fire dragon magic could be sufficient to forge the magic metal. This matter had to be considered in the long run. After all, the fire dragon magic was constantly decreasing and could be completely exhausted at any time. He could not stop cultivating the mini fire dragon. Just then, the mini fire dragon at the location of the heart woke up and immediately began to cry in his mind. Oh! Its emotions were very simple. He just wanted to eat the fire dragon magic. It only knows how to eat all day long. List could not restrain it to stay in his heart, then left the blacksmith shop, took out a fire dragon jar, released the fire dragon magic and absorbed it to feed it. Every time the mini fire dragon ate enough fire dragon magic, it would excrete about 1/10 of the magic impurities. Helping List's dragon dough chi grow was a very special training method. List almost didn't need to practice, he could constantly become stronger. The power of the dragon's fighting spirit made the power of his fighting skills soar. He had not yet fully learned the red sun rising fire, but he felt that he could fight the Earl to a draw with just the bonus of the dragon's fighting spirit. Maybe I have to find a chance to have a good fight with the Count. If I accidentally defeat him, wouldn't the scene be wonderful? He thought to himself, trying to find joy in his bitterness. Although the growth of strength is refreshing, the priceless magic of the fire dragon is constantly consumed, which makes his heart ache. Taking a few deep breaths, he suppressed the heartache and quickly took out the light blue metal to divert his attention. The blacksmith shop could not forge it and he himself did not study too much. The weight was the same as fine gold and had good chi conductive properties, but he did not know what properties it would show. Mithril was light as a feather. Fine gold was indestructible. Orichalcum was indestructible. These were the properties of the 3 known magic metals. Among them, the properties of fine gold and orichalcum were just a description. There was no logical relationship between spear and shield. A powerful weapon made of fine gold could easily destroy an ordinary orichalcum weapon. A powerful weapon made of orichalcum could easily block an ordinary fine gold weapon. The light blue metal is most likely a magic metal. I don't know what it is called in Sanskrit. But since there is no similar magic metal on this continent, I can just use the serpentines to name it blue iron, gold, silver, copper and iron. Fine gold, mithril, orichalcum and blue iron. However, List suddenly thought, there are 5 layers of materials in the sun scepter. Except for the crystal-like material in the middle, which may not be metal, the other 4 may be metal or even magic metal. In addition, the materials of the communication bottle and the 13 boxes may also be magic metal. He took out a box from the gem space. This was a box for books, but the books had been taken out by List and stacked in the corner of the space. Playing with the box, which was about the size of a takeout box, it was easy to find that the metal material was special. It was very light and felt a bit like plastic. But it was definitely metal. The weight may be comparable to mithril, and the hardness is also good. Moreover, it has been preserved for hundreds of thousands of years without decaying, which shows the value of this metal. The most important thing is that it seems to be able to engrave a magic array and then use the blood of the descendants of the sun to activate it. List was not sure whether the magic array was a line on the box or something else. But he knew that the effect of this metal was very strong. With blue iron, it's time to give it another name. What should I call it? The metal seems to be gold, silver, copper, iron, aluminum or gold, silver, copper, iron and tin? His life before crossing over had nothing to do with metal tools, and he didn't even know how to repair water pipes. He couldn't remember whether the metal was aluminum or tin. However, tin seemed to be less used in daily life. Was it mainly used for barbecue tin foil? List was inclined to think that the metal was aluminum. After all, he had seen a lot of aluminum products, and the decoration materials were aluminum doors and windows. In addition, he also knew that there was a layer of metal paper inside the cigarette box, called aluminum foil. It showed that aluminum was very commonly used. Then this magic metal will be named after aluminum. It is mainly used for packaging and it is light and feels like plastic. Let's just call it plastic aluminum. Why is this name so weird? Despite the weirdness, he named this metal plastic aluminum drift bottle and plastic aluminum box. Just as List was immersed in the study of blue iron and plastic aluminum. In the magic workshop, Chris Truth was trying hard to release the high-level magic water wave shield. She didn't have the talent of the siren He. She could successfully release it at once and she tried again and failed. Finally, with continuous attempts, the released water wave shield became bigger and bigger, and soon the light blue water curtain enveloped her. Just a little bit more and I can close the water wave shield and really fix the dynamic magic array of high-level magic. Sweat was dripping from her forehead, and even in winter she still felt tired and hot. But she gritted her teeth and made a final effort. Little by little, the water wave shield began to close. Finally, 10 minutes after releasing the magic, the water wave shield was completely closed. In an instant, her spirit suddenly burst, and her thinking entered a new realm. In particular, the perception and mastery of the water wave shield magic rose to the level of insight, and she felt that if she released it again, it would not be so difficult. The details of the dynamic magic array had never been so clear. I did it. Chapter 506. Thanks to Bitter Tree, there are 4 more chapters to follow. Chris Truth was promoted to a great magician. Before the tofu was made, the good news had come. List was equally excited to see Chris, who came to the castle to report the good news. He did have a problem with magicians. Not because magicians like to make explosions, but because the magicians' search for the truth made them untaboo. The group of madmen at the goat gathering dared to kill dragons. What else would they not dare to do? List did not want such a group of madmen to exist in his territory. But the water magician He was different. She was List's exclusive and the direct source of the wealth of the sea. The light magician Paris was also different. The new head of the patrol orders of chivalry, although changed to a magician, had no interest in exploring the truth. Finally, the true human great magician, the unbiased Chrissy Truth, was also different. She said that she would dedicate herself to the truth and was willing to explore the truth for a lifetime, but after all, List saved her life. With such a relationship, it would curb her crazy ideas. Moreover, after getting along, List also felt that Chris was just an ordinary scholar. She liked to explore the truth, but she didn't have that kind of crazy, twisted idea. Under the constant influence of List, she had integrated into the life of the territory. She often took a bath, went to restaurants, went for a walk, and even liked to watch funny plays. She lived an ordinary life. List was very assured of her. Congratulations, Chris, you finally got what you wanted and became a great magician. I will also fulfill my promise to build you a wizard tower on Black Horse Island. Thank you, Lord Viscount. You have been helping me make potions. This is what I should thank you for. It is my duty to serve you. Chris was not proud of making potions. She was still gentle and humble. I heard that the territory's finances are a little difficult. I'm not in a hurry to build a wizard tower. I hope that Lord Viscount can solve the territory's finances first and then build a wizard tower for me later. What a thoughtful gesture. List said with relief, it's all right. Recently, the glass produced in our territory has started to be sold. This is a very profitable industry. Moreover, the income from the flower brew is ready to be recovered, and the territory's finances are healthy again. I was already planning to build a new castle, and now I can help you build the wizard tower. Ah, Lord Viscount, you should build the castle first. My wizard tower can be built later. There's no need to argue. Let's repair the Magus Tower first, List said in an implacable manner. Chris was so touched that her eyes lit up. Lord Viscount, you are so kind to me. I hope to serve you forever. List smiled and didn't say anything. In fact, the main reason why he built the Mage Tower first was so that the architects in the territory could accumulate experience in the construction of new buildings through the Mage Tower. The territory had rubber, glass, ironwood, rocks, bricks, and the knowledge of modern architecture in List's mind. Of course, they had to build new buildings. He planned to build a named castle for himself. The style of the castle would be designed according to the neoclassical style. The most typical representative would be the White House in the United States. The traditional castles in this world were all buildings that could be used for sustainable defense. However, List is not interested in this. The castle is only meaningful in a strategic location. The enemy of a small island like Black Horse Island is only pirates. Pirates could not besiege an island castle for dozens of days, so there was no need to build a castle that could be defended for half a year. He originally wanted to design a coastal castle, and even the location had been planned. However, according to the architects, a castle soaked in seawater would be very humid. That's why he moved the location of the castle from the sea to the shore and built it in the style of the White House. At the same time, a canal would be dug to the sea so that a chi could freely enter and exit. The size of the castle may be designed as a 4-story building. If the stress test is completed, it is likely to be designed as a 5-story building. Although he only lived alone, it did not prevent him from building the castle into a synonym for luxury. There was no need to make himself feel wronged. So, before that, he would build a wizard tower first to test the new architectural style and whether it had enough strength to support each floor of the structure. Chris, you first stabilize your realm as a great mage and then come with me to Black Horse Island in a few days. Choose a suitable location and build the wizard tower. Thank you, Viscount. Chris's face was red with excitement. I am going to specialize in magic arrays and make magic equipment. I hope to help Viscount make Wind Pearl and Water Pearl in the future. I look forward to it. Chris Truth was sent away. List directly called out the smoke mission. The mission has changed. Sure enough, Chris was the first to become a great mage and the smoke mission changed. Then a new mission was issued, which made List's eyes light up. Mission: Avril Mask, a burlesque actress who came to Flower Town to perform, likes the clean and tidy streets of Flower Town, which can inspire her a lot of creative inspiration. However, she is confused that she can only perform burlesque. Why not help her realize her artistic ideals? Reward: Loki's new magic. Loki is about to have a second kind of magic, which means that he has indeed become a mid-level dragon. Low-level World of Warcraft and dragons can only have one kind of magic. List was looking forward to the Chocobo's new magic, and the mission naturally had to be done immediately. Burlesque actress Avril Mask? If she doesn't want to act in burlesque, then let me help her realize her artistic ideals. If she doesn't want to act in burlesque, then let her sing opera, Peking opera, Huangmei opera. I know both, the Princess Fuma, and Fairy Match. It's just that Huangmei opera and Peking opera obviously don't meet the aesthetic standards of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. He thought about it and decided to call Avril Mask over and ask her personally. It just so happened that the burlesque team of North Valley City was performing in Flower Town today. With the prosperity of Flower Town, the commoners here had money in their hands, and their desire to spend gradually increased. Several burlesque teams were attracted. Master, Avril Mask has arrived in the castle's living room waiting. Got it? List went downstairs and met the artistic burlesque actress in the living room. She was a tall blonde woman with good looks. She might be a bit old, probably more than 30 years old. Avril salutes to the respected Sir Lord. Rise. List beckoned. Your surname is Mask, so does that mean that your family has always been burlesque? Yes, Sir Lord, it has always been burlesque since my grandfather. I've seen enough of burlesque. Avril couldn't help but exclaim, ah. Burlesque is fun to watch occasionally, but it's all kinds of comical appearances and childish actions. It's very boring. Avril, have you never thought of innovation? Do you think that if the audience doesn't get enough of it, then you won't get enough of it? Sir Lord. Avril does have some complaints about performing too many burlesque shows, but please rest assured, Sir Lord, Avril will go back and rearrange it to arrange more fresh burlesque shows for Sir Lord to enjoy. I don't want to watch burlesque shows, I want to see some normal performances. Avril, I have an idea that I need you to realize. Of course, you can refuse. If you do, I'll find another burlesque team. List said with a faint smile. Avril suddenly became nervous. Sir Lord, please give me your orders. Avril's team is the best burlesque team in North Valley City. We can definitely meet Sir Lord's needs. I hope you can perform a play. Play? It's a type of performance that focuses on dialogue, and can be performed on stage with folklore, love stories, and so on. List briefly explained, he actually didn't like watching plays, but to complete the smoke mission he gave Avril some pointers. Of course, if he wanted to do it, he would work hard. He decided to buy Avril's burlesque team, change it into a drama team, and rehearse 1 or 2 classic plays to enrich the spiritual life of the territory. Chapter 507. To be precise, Liszt wanted to create a stage play in the form of a play, similar to the style of Shakespeare's Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet. Of course, he did not know much about this kind of stage play. He had never seen a complete stage play. But this did not prevent him from creating a new stage play in this world. It did not need to be a sophisticated art form, nor did it need to be rich in plot content. He just needed to create the form of a stage play. When the stage play became popular, there would naturally be novelists who would create really good works. Liszt only needed to adapt 1 or 2 of the more classic night novels to create a stage play. And according to the hint of the smoke mission, Avril knew that Avril Mask had artistic cells. She just lacked inspiration. Adapting a stage play could be left to the other party. Avril, I intend to buy your burlesque team and help you create a new stage play in the form of a play. In the future, your team will move to Flower Town and perform mainly for the residents of my territory. As long as you can rehearse a classic stage play, I will recommend you to perform in a bigger city. The burlesque team was made up of freedmen, and they were freedmen who lived a difficult life. Most of them were relatives. Avril and her family had no reason to disagree with Liszt's willingness to buy them. The new stage play also deeply attracted Avril. Sir Lord, Avril is very willing to perform a stage play for you, but I don't know if it will be popular. Don't worry about whether it will be popular or not. I will buy your team and set a basic salary for you according to the standards of workshops in the territory. After that, the income from each performance will be divided. My expectation for you is to study art, not to make money. Whether a stage play could make money depended on whether this form of artistic performance could be recognized. But no matter how popular a stage play was, the team's performance time and number of times was limited. It was very difficult to make a lot of money. Liszt had a lot of assets in his hands and did not need to count on a stage play to make money. He invested in a stage play for 2 reasons. One was to complete the mission and the other was for publicity. He was willing to do it even if he had to pay. Avril was overjoyed when she received Liszt's confirmation. She immediately asked Liszt for advice on how to rehearse the play. I've already told you the format of the stage play. You might still be a little confused, but you have plenty of time to figure it out. I recommend to you 2 night novels, Hymn to the Loyalty of the Knight of Valsy, and Sir Piero of Great Ambition. Simplify them, distill the main story and arrange it for the stage. These 2 night novels did not have too many war scenes. They were more realistic and easy to adapt. Most importantly, the theme was healthy. The Loyal Hymn of the Valsy Knight was a story about a knight who loyally protected his lord, while the ambitious Sir Piero described a commoner who bravely followed his lord and eventually became a glorious noble knight. There was no doubt that this kind of story was loved by the commoners and appreciated by the nobles. Avril, rehearse a general story as soon as possible. I will guide you on which part of the story has problems and you can make changes. Liszt set a limit in order to complete the task as soon as possible. I want to see him of Valsy on stage within 3 days. My lord, is 3 days too short? I don't know if I can do it well. Then let me give you a little more advice. The story of Valsy is relatively simple. Bandits came to the territory, the lord was injured, and Valsy loyally protected the lord. He defeated the bandits and the territory was safe, so the lord gave him a lot of rewards. You just have to intercept the main story, add a little dialogue and do some simple imitation. Then I'll give it a try. Go. Avril's burlesque team was renamed Black Horse Island Drama Company, and began to concentrate on the hymn of the Valsy Knight of Valsy. Liszt took Chris Truth to Black Horse Island to choose the location of the Mage Tower. Generally, mages would build their Mage Tower in a relatively remote location so that they could conduct their research without being disturbed. However, Chris could no longer leave the town lifestyle, so she chose to build her own Mage Tower on the edge of Port Town. Moreover, Port Town, Newcastle, and the Mage Tower were distributed in a triangular shape. She did not decide on the architectural style of the Mage Tower because Liszt proposed a new architectural style: arched doors, floor-to-ceiling windows and large pillars. It also had separate stairwells and a plumbing system with a water tower. The design was also 5-story high, circular building, with 4 rooms on each floor in addition to the stairwell. Although it was called a Mage Tower, it was actually an apartment building. Liszt had plans to continue to add such Mage Towers in the future to train more mages or magic scholars. He did not like the madness of mages when researching the truth, but the exploration of magic and magic arrays was a questionable research direction in the future. It was entirely possible to industrialize magic. Of course, this idea could not be realized for the time being. Chris was not even willing to train magic apprentices, let alone a large number of magic scholars. Moreover, mages were highly dangerous. To achieve the industrialization of magic, it was necessary to first achieve full control of the territory. Only with the protection of a knight's chi could the threat of magic be restrained. The requirements are clear. You need to complete the design of the Mage Tower as soon as possible. After getting the approval of Chris, you can build it immediately. Liszt ordered Jemiah rammed earth. The architect, who had a bad record, had been conscientious since coming to Black Horse Island and had not caused any more accidents. Because he came earlier, he had more experience in rubber, bricks, glass, etc., and temporarily served as the chief architect of the territory. The architects among the new serfs still did not understand the language and had to adapt to the architectural style. My lord, please rest assured that we will design the Mage Tower perfectly. Liszt turned to Chris and said, the Mage Tower will be based on your opinion. If you have any needs, just ask. Having said that, the architectural tone of the Mage Tower was set by him, and Chris was embarrassed to overthrow it and build the Mage Tower in her mind. Moreover, Liszt's plan was really good. The Mage Tower in the neoclassical architectural style was indeed much more beautiful and practical. 3 days later, Liszt had returned to Flower Town, and the Black Horse Island Drama Troupe's rehearsal of Valsy was officially staged in the castle manor. There were not many audiences, only the town officials. The stage was very simple, the content of the play was even more simple, and the actors' performances were very poor. Valsy, which was about 15 minutes long, came to an awkward end. It was more of a farce than a play. Liszt was speechless. These comedians didn't know how to perform a stage play at all. However, when he called out the smoke mission, he smiled happily. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.